No.
Red's
Red's off.
okay. Y'all, so are you sure?
Red is off. Red stop.
No, it sounds like I'm echoing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. press turns on.
I call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. As you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you. Well, our student representatives are here with us this evening. Welcome to your first meeting. We have Emma Whitaker from Auburn High and Sam Woolsey from Blacksburg High School, and we are going to ask them to read our mission, vision, and core value statements.
Sweet. Our mission. MCPS is an innovative educational community. We value diversity, and we are committed to equity and inclusion. MCPS empowers learners to realize success in an ever-changing global society through collaboration with communities, families, staff, and students. MCPS provides a safe, engaging learning environment and intentional exposure to positive social, emotional, and academic experiences.
Our beliefs are, number 1, all students can learn in order to pursue their dreams. Number 2, schools are safe places of joy, wonder, and creativity. Number 3, every person deserves to be loved, valued, and respected. Number 4, kindness is an essential skill of a responsible, productive community member. Number 5, the diversity of our community is one of our greatest strengths. Number 6, all people deserve equitable access to opportunities and resources. Number 7, every child deserves an advocate. Number 8, honoring the voices of students and other stakeholders strengthens the school community. Number 9, open communication and feedback are vital to our growth. Number 10, learning and teaching are collective efforts that begin at birth and involve the entire community. Number 11, relationships build and high expectations are foundational to student success.
Thank you, Emma. It gets easier, believe me. Don't worry, I did the same thing. So, next, we have the adoption of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Woods, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Turbaka?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Next, do I have a motion about the superintendent contract for Dr. Bernard Bragan, Jr.?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Woods, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Turbaka?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
No.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
6 in favor.
Motion passes. So it is my honor and pleasure to announce the appointment of our new superintendent, Dr. Bernard F. Bragan, Jr. Dr. Bragan is a highly experienced leader with over 34 years of experience in education. He is current and over 10 years as a division superintendent. He's currently superintendent of Edison Township Public Schools in Edison, New Jersey, a district with almost 17,000 students and 2,100 staff members across 19 schools. He was also Director of Educational Leadership and Doctorate Education programs at Monmouth University, was an assistant superintendent, a principal, an assistant principal, a supervisor of special services, and began his career as a special education teacher. We look forward to the leadership, student-focused dedication, and commitment to collaboration that Dr. Bragan will bring to the students, staff, and families in our county. He's an authentic and genuine person who will bring a great sense of wit, intelligence, and humor to this role, and I know we are very excited to have him join us. Unfortunately, his school board meets on the same day as ours, so he's unable to join us this evening. He will be visiting early next week to begin meeting with some staff and stakeholders, and the plan is for him to join us effective December 1st or sooner if his current board releases him from his contract. Fingers crossed. We do, however, have a video that Dr. Bragan has prepared to introduce himself to his new community. But before we start that, do any of the other board members want to add to my comments?
I'm looking forward to his knowledge and experience to bring all that to MCPS.
I'd also like to add that I was very taken by his enthusiasm and his passion to come to Montgomery County Public Schools, and I look forward to him meeting our wonderful staff and all of our great teachers.
So what we just did, I think, is we're told, and I believe is probably the most important decision that any of us will make on this board. It's probably the most important decision that I will make, and I'm honored to have had a hand in it. Personally, I did vote yes, but beyond that, I'm very happy. I'm very enthusiastic about this. I'm all in on this decision. Dr. Bragan, to me during the interview process, came off as very experienced, very smart, sharp, inclusive. I think he had a balanced approach to dealing with things that I think will serve us well when we get into difficult issues. I think that he also has the right view of local government and how the power structure works. He stressed trustworthiness, not just in others, but also in himself, and talked about accountability, again, not just in others, but keeping himself accountable, which I think is really important. I think he's going to do great here. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'd just like to add that when we were in our Zoom interviews, I really enjoyed just listening to him. I felt like he had a good level head, and that's one of the things that attracted me to bringing him here to MCPS. We had a lot of good candidates. Just felt like he maybe rose above. So I, too, am just looking forward to having him come and lead our district into the future.
And I really just echo what's already been said. For me, I was looking for a great superintendent who could come in and lead us right now, because we have a lot of issues that we need help with right now, and I feel like he's ready for that. There are a lot of great candidates who will be great superintendents, but I think he's going to be great for us right now.
I guess what we'll go ahead and let's meet Dr. Bragan. I have not seen this either.
Good evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Bernie Bragan, and unfortunately, I can't be there in person this evening. My current position in New Jersey, I have our Board of Education meeting is tonight as well, so I apologize for that. I also want to express to the Montgomery County Public Schools Board of Education how grateful I am that they've selected me as the candidate to be the next superintendent of such a fine institution. Obviously, someone on the outside looking in can only get a peripheral view of what's taking place, but I'm really excited, and the things that I see make it a district that I would definitely like to be a part of. And I see a lot of great things in the Montgomery County Public Schools, and I would hope that I'd be able to come in and help increase the effectiveness in some of the things that we're doing really well and continue to move the district forward. It's really exciting for me. It's a great opportunity. I come from having, I think, 34 years in the business right now as an educator. Most recently, almost 10 years as a school superintendent in New Jersey. And I look forward to two things: to moving to Montgomery County, Virginia. It's a beautiful place, and I've been fortunate enough to visit there a few times during the interview process and then after that. And I really look forward to being a member of the community as a citizen. And then I also look forward to being able to lead such a fine institution in a school district. And hopefully the things that I bring and some of the leadership capacity that I've had and some of the experiences that I have learned over my time as a school leader will be helpful to the community and help the school district continue on its path of excellence and continue to move forward. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity. I'm humbled to be selected, and I look forward to working with all of you and to becoming a part of the community and working together to hopefully make our school system live up to what its motto is. And again, I can't say how excited I am to start and how grateful I am to the Board of Education for selecting me for this very prestigious position of leading the Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting all of you one day soon in person. Thank you.
Okay, well, there you go. That is our new superintendent, Bernie Bragan. And we are all looking forward to having him join us. Oh, yeah, I guess we should applaud. Well, with that work done, I can go home. No. Public address. Our next agenda item is public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters in this community. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. We have the option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Woods will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue with their business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end of the business meeting. The clock continues through applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. And we have quite a list this evening. I will call each speaker up by name in the order that they signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not respond to speakers during public address. The screens will show when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining when time is up. Please state your name and the area of the county you live in. The first speaker is Glenn Chilcote, and Dustin Priestley is on deck.
Chair Cass and members of the board. My name is Glenn Chilcote, and I live in Blacksburg. First off, I would like to welcome Dr. Bregan to Montgomery County, and on behalf of the MCEA and all the employees of Montgomery County, we look forward to working with him. I stand before you asking that you honor the voices of the employees of MCPS and allow us to enhance our working conditions and our students' learning conditions. When it comes to concrete items, I can confidently say that employees would like the opportunity to discuss fair and equitable schedules, including equitable duties, an unencumbered lunch when possible, protected planning time, choice in professional development, autonomy in lesson plan formatting, a meaningful seat when it comes to creating, planning, and choosing curriculums, and professional respect from administrators when employees bring forward concerns. The culture of any organization is incredibly important. When educational leaders see teachers, education support professionals, and parents as valued, integral parts of the whole, students benefit. We want the best for our students. We want to come in each day knowing that we have the support and time to give our students the best educational experience possible. I would like to ask you all to set a concrete timeline that will result in a fair and equitable resolution. Now, my friends that are here this evening that support collective bargaining, please stand up. We are here tonight to show you that a meaningful seat at the table is our hope. Thank you.
Excuse me. Please. Please. Thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, you're here already, Mr. Priestley. Mr. Priestley is up, and after Mr. Priestley is Laura Purcell.
Thank you. Dustin Priestley, Blacksburg Middle School, English Language Arts, 6th grade. What McGraw-Hill has sold our state and county is the promise of an idiot-proof curriculum. What these companies believe is that teachers are interchangeable cogs and that equity and individuation, read individuality, are antithetical. However many doctors they employ, companies will never be able to mechanize a teacher's ability to differentiate curriculum for learners who are incapable of being served by a one-size-fits-all education, which is every learner. We have been told that this program will raise up our below grade level readers, but our county's reading experts will tell you that close reading and reading are entirely separate skill sets and that no ELA curriculum will address those skill deficits. So what is the actual problem StudySync solves? It addresses the potential for parental opposition to books teachers teach. If the county has lost faith in the ability of teachers to liaise with parents and explain our reasoning for choosing texts while providing alternatives for those whose needs those texts don't meet, then we have bigger problems. The solution is not to force textbook instruction as a cure-all and turn teaching into Uber for education. There is no problem of students having been taught books. meant for higher grade levels. I know because I have been taught Frankenstein 7 times. There is always something new to be gleaned from rereading. If the point of this new curriculum is truly to dig deep, then to suggest that revisiting a text in subsequent years is a bad thing is what I would call poor spiraling. The activities and instruction in this program are unvaried and monotonous. Classes have to be built around these computer-based worksheets. There is no gifted differentiation beyond the vague promise at the last meeting that some kids will excel no matter what. While the scaffolding for those below grade level and English learners is unwieldy and unhelpful. What's more, this instruction is routinely written in student-unfriendly language. Case in point, asking 11-year-olds what kind of news they read most often and querying, how do contemporary issues and culture impact your worldview? This is asked with 6 paragraphs of instructions and without any multimodal engagement provided by StudySync. The lesson plans we are provided are vague gestures at teachability with invocations to present pages of text and tables in an engaging way. When it comes to teaching our classes, we are the experts, and good leadership empowers us rather than insulting our ability to spiral our lessons. We need trust and respect for our knowledge and craft, and we need informed decisions that aren't based on the promises made in advertisements by for-profit companies. We need decisions made in the interests of our students and those of us who actually teach them. I didn't get into teaching to be a substitute, and I don't think any of my colleagues did either. To the parents and taxpayers of this county, I suggest you ask how much this program costs, and to the board and those present, I thank you for your time and attention.
Got to remember. Okay. Next up, we have Laura Purcell, and on deck is Katie Seideman.
Good evening. My name is Laura Purcell, and I live in District F. I'm speaking tonight because I was bothered by the palpable tension between teachers and MCPS administration at the September 6th meeting. That dynamic is bad, and it doesn't help students. When MCPS administration claimed that teachers were invited to review the ELA textbooks, I took time to examine a spreadsheet from MCPS documenting the process. Line 23 of that spreadsheet recorded the parent and public comments. Textbooks were available for public review for 1 month. There were 3 evening events. How many comments did MCPS receive? 0. The Code of Virginia states that for textbook evaluation process, notice to parents that textbooks under consideration for approval will be listed on the school division's website and made available at designated locations for review by any interested citizens, and then that there are procedures to ensure appropriate consideration of citizen comments and observations. While MCPS did create a web page and host events, there was no notice. Information was not distributed by MCPS in any way. Not one newsletter announcement, not one tweet or Facebook post or press release. As I understand the Virginia Code, it is your responsibility as the board to ensure transparency in this process. Do better, because the MCPS administration was perfectly happy in a county of almost 100,000 people, subtract the tech kids if you want, it's still 75 or 60 or whatever, to put forward this process as if 0 public comments is sufficient. It's not sufficient, it's embarrassing. This should be an additional piece of evidence to you that the administration did not engage in a good faith, transparent process with teachers about this textbook adoption and subsequent blindsiding changes to the 612 ELA curriculum. This new ELA textbook is simply bad pedagogy. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, the nation's report card, found in 2019 only 34% of students in 8th grade scored at or above proficiency in reading, and there has been no real progress in closing the achievement gap in reading proficiency for secondary students over the past 28 years. A 6th grader who's a reluctant or struggling reader is not going to be engaged by having to crouch over their Chromebook reading excerpts from Wind in the Willows, and an advanced or on-level reader will be bored before they start. Please support teachers and give them the autonomy to make the decisions to meet the needs of their students. Let the teachers use the full spectrum of their resources to reach students, not just a milquetoast textbook adopted under a dubious process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Purcell. Hello, Ms. Seidemann, and on deck is Jerry Souter.
Good evening. My name is Katie Seidemann, and I live in Christiansburg. I'm also a music teacher at AHS, AMS, and EMHS. I'm here tonight to continue to voice my support for the right of MCPS employees to collectively bargain their contracts. I would also like to reiterate a few facts to combat the disinformation surrounding the topic. Collective bargaining does not and cannot raise taxes in Montgomery County. Negotiations concerning the budget would only take into consideration what money is already in the MCPS budget. The MCEA is not an outside agent bargaining on behalf of our MCPS employees. The MCEA is our teachers, ESPs, bus drivers, librarians, etc., who work in our schools every day, including today, and are still here tonight. The MCEA is MCPS employees working for MCPS employees. Lastly, employee wages are not the only thing being brought to the negotiating table. While this is absolutely a concern, it is not even our most pressing concern. There are battles to fight and hurdles to jump that school employees manage daily that have nothing to do with how much we get paid, all for the love of working with our students. But just because we love our students, does that mean that we deserve working conditions that are any more restrictive, any less respectful, any more overwhelming, or any less fulfilling than anyone else? Collective bargaining is critical to increased employee retention and increased employee morale. This is not a time to kick the can down the road until the timing is right. Our MCPS employees have been and continue to work without a say in the decisions made for and about them. And honestly, we're reaching our breaking points. The great migration of teachers and ESPs leaving our schools is happening right now. And the best way to keep our employees is to include them. My colleagues and I deserve the right to have a seat at the table where decisions are being made about our jobs, about our working conditions, and about the working conditions of our coworkers, and about the learning conditions of our students. The best solutions are developed when people work collaboratively. Collective bargaining affords us that collaborative opportunity to create better working conditions for all MCPS employees and, as a result, create better learning conditions for our students. Now is the time to approve collective bargaining for all MCPS employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seidemann. Next, we have Mr. Souter. Oops, I think we're going to do a little mic check here, huh? Okay. And after Mr. Souter, we have Gretchen Dissler.
Okay. My name is Jerry Sauter, and there are 2 points I'd like to make tonight. For the past 36 years, I've been an English teacher at Auburn High School, as well as a member of the MCEA. I am the MCEA, and I strongly support collective bargaining. As an English teacher, I want to register my strong disapproval of the new English textbook/curriculum being forced down our throats. I'm used to some members of the community objecting to English teachers doing our job. But for 35 years, I've been secure in the knowledge that MCPS had my back. This year, however, the threat is from within. And instead of the county having my back, I have been stabbed there repeatedly. We were lied to, we were misled, and it seems that you were too. And you continue to be misled. I could rebut most of what Carl and Mike Lean presented at the last meeting, but I don't have time. I cannot use any material that is not specifically in the textbook units we have to follow. Mike Lean says there's a process for getting all the pieces of literature approved, just she doesn't quite know what that is yet. Can I use current events or real-world examples? The Queen died, and there's an amazing eulogy that would complement a lesson I'm about to teach. Sorry, I can't use it. It's not in the textbook. I also can't design my own lessons, create my own writing prompts, or use rubrics I have honed over the past 3 decades. My feedback on papers is limited to the selected canned responses. That's it. I have a master's degree in creative writing, yet none of that matters. I just have to follow the program, then repeat. I have something that no one else in this room has. I have taught over 4,000 Auburn kids. I know them. The textbook does not. The textbook requires I teach pieces I stopped using decades ago because they did not work with my kids. And what about all the pieces of literature I found that do work? I can't use them unless they're in the textbook. Imagine going to Carol Lee's or Route 8 Donuts expecting a pastry handmade by a talented baker and instead being handed a box of stale Hostess donuts. That's what this program does to our kids. feeds them stale, tasteless garbage made in a factory thousands of miles away. Michaeline uses the word robust. What she should have said is robotic. Don't our students deserve English education that is not cookie cutter? A program that relies on the talent and skill and passion of our teachers, that actually is geared toward the kids we know and love in each of our buildings? Carl was my principal, and every evaluation lauded my material, my selection material, my creative lessons, and my ability to find material that connects. So 6 years ago, Carl said that my instruction was exceptional, but now I can't be trusted to do anything but follow a script. The bottom line is this. All the people making these decisions and raving about this are not classroom teachers. Annie Whitaker, Carl Pauly, Michaeline Mayer combined, do not have the 40 years as a classroom teacher that I do. And they definitely have not tried to use this program. You, the board, are in charge. Why not ask teachers what they think and let them know they will not be punished for disagreeing? Then maybe we can return Montgomery County to the high standard of education.
Mr. Souter, I have to ask you to stop, sorry. Please, I know you want to clap, but I really need to ask you not to any longer, okay? Thank you. Ms. Disler?
My name is Gretchen Disler, and I live in Blacksburg. Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Whitaker, members of the board. 4 days before we met our new students, ELA teachers were informed that we would be teaching a canned curriculum, no exceptions. I've always loved the beginning of the school year, and am deeply invested in the lessons I have given almost 3 decades to creating and refining. Lessons that recognize the individuality of our 6th graders, the many different ways they learn. To be told that my professional experiences and insights were to be disregarded was an unspeakable violation of all that education represents. On August 11th, we were dictated by people who had not been in our classrooms, who had no interest in how we taught, how we understand and relate to the young people entrusted to us, that our experience and dedication had no worth. We know the hearts and minds of our students. We know how essential it is to resonate with struggling readers as well as the proficient one, to provide learning experiences that ignite young readers, all of them. We are professionals. We are teachers, not bosses, not babysitters, not paper pushers. After a month of using StudySync, I find that some of the short stories are indeed really good. These students enjoy the blasts, which are short current event articles with colorful pictures and interactive activities. That being said, the skill lessons are stunningly lacking. ELA teachers are reduced to textbook lessons where students just drag and drop boxes or click on multiple choice answers. It is painful to see my young, open, hopeful students clicking away in their individual bubbles. 2 weeks ago, I taught the StudySync lesson on annotation. It began with a short video, which the students call cringy, followed by drag and drop components. The students didn't actually have a chance to practice annotation. 2 years ago, my co-teacher and I created an annotation lesson where our students worked collaboratively in groups with highlighters and pencils and pens and paper text. They certainly were engaged. I've always had novel units and literature circles in my classes. The novels complement what my social studies colleague is teaching. The students love to make connections between their novels and what they're learning in their classes. I am savvy enough to choose appropriate novels and would never offer a novel that a student or a student's family would find offensive. StudySync offers no current fiction for novels or short stories. It is untenable that an experienced English teacher is not allowed to offer quality current literature to her students. I am here to plead for flexibility within our language arts instruction. This all or nothing dictate is counter to the purpose of education. If you choose to disregard the expertise of professionals, most of whom have given our lives to teaching, please consider our students. Montgomery County wants to send informed and empathetic citizens out into the world, not robots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Disler. Next up, we have Carmen Guitry. And after Ms. Guitry, we have Christopher Jordan. Sorry, I forgot to give you a heads up.
No problem. Hi, I'm Carmen Guitry. I'm a resident of Blacksburg, and I have 2 children in the school system. I've taught for over 15 years. I was first teaching at the high school level, and then now at the university level. Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. In the 6 years that I've attended my kids' curriculum nights, I've always walked away impressed by the professionalism, knowledge, and care of teachers in this school district. Teachers know that students have different learning styles, that best practices in the classroom involve a constant dance between maintaining learning standards and determining how best to meet students wherever they are. StudySync does not know who our children are, what they know, what they care about, how they learn best. While it may be effective in teaching to the test, with drills and multiple choice tests, it is, in the words of one teacher, sterile and tone deaf. In other words, it is canned corporate content that simply cannot and should not be mandated to replace what our teachers do. I understand the deep and sincere desire to promote student success and literacy, but attempting to remedy that by putting students in front of screens is like trying to make excellent basketball players by giving them online programs that teach the rules of basketball instead of actually getting up and practicing. This may seem like a stretch, but in education classes, teachers learn that to produce literate students, students must have opportunities to write and read, to read lots of genres, novels, poetry, short stories, articles, to read silently and get lost in a book, to read out loud, to visit the school library. Teachers, at minimum, have to earn a bachelor's degree, complete a teacher training program, be observed as student teachers, and pass state-required certification programs. They are professionals. Teachers, unlike what has been implied, do not fill class time with materials chosen willy-nilly. They carefully design curricula that align with state standards and engage the very individual students they come to know in their classes each year. I cannot think of one teacher I know who does not care deeply about his or her students and their success. I want those teachers to teach my kids, not a for-profit program. I implore you to make StudySync one tool in the arsenal that teachers have for creating a robust curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittrey. Next up is Christopher Jordan. And after Mr. Jordan is Lowell Bowman.
Hello, my name is Christopher Jordan, and I live on E. Hart Street in Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm the father of 2 BHS students, and I teach 8th grade English at Christiansburg Middle School. Greetings, board members, superintendent, and members of the public. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking to express my concerns over the implementation of the new ELA content platform, StudySync. I can tell you that teachers feel blindsided by and handcuffed to an implementation that does not serve our students. Teachers and administrators were blindsided. We were involved in the selection process, but at the time we were told that it would be a tool. 3 days before school began, we were told that it would be the tool. Then we were told that we could only teach from the platform. Then we were further told that the reason for the rigidity of this implementation is because we had failed our students, that we were not competent to design and deliver instruction. Teachers feel unheard in this process. Concerns are dismissed as lack of knowledge or understanding instead of addressed. We're discouraged from sharing our concerns and begins to feel as if dissent is being stifled. An indication of this disconnect is the number of teachers who are here to speak at the school board. This is not the platform for this. This is not the way that this should happen, but our concerns are not being heard through the official channels. The platform has numerous flaws. It has stunningly inadequate writing support, the area that is most in need in many schools. It has weak differentiation, very weak support for advanced students. And the excerpting process leads to very short reading passages that do not build the reading endurance that our students need to be successful in the world. This platform does not represent or serve our students well. It also contributes to a sense of lack of agency from teachers. The process of implementation in Montgomery County robs teachers of agency. Teachers are no longer free to capitalize on student interest and engagement, to individualize instruction, or to respond to students' needs, except as those needs are anticipated by the designers of a textbook created far from Montgomery County with no knowledge of our students or context. The textbook, or more accurately, the heavy-handed implementation of this textbook platform and its misrepresentation as a curriculum, hurts MCPS students and teachers at a moment when teachers and students need all the support that they can get. To illustrate, spending the summer seeing the desperate need for more writing instruction in my classroom, I had designed an entire writing instruction platform that I had intended to implement, only to be told 3 days before school that I was not allowed to implement that because it was not part of the Study Sync platform. But surely there was some writing support in there somewhere. The textbook platform can serve students and teachers when implementation is left to the experts in the classroom. Externally imposed curriculum does not serve our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Next up, we have Mr. Bowman, and after Mr. Bowman, we have Courtney Roberts.
Good evening. My name's Lowell Bowman, Republican candidate for delegate. Tonight, I wanted to follow up on the remarks that my wife and I had made last meeting regarding our daughter's rape. Dr. Johnson contacted my wife and I today, and we look forward to meeting with him soon to discuss the sexual assault policies of this school system. I want to be very clear, sexual assault should be a top priority for this board. Approximately 70 women commit suicide every day in the United States following an act of sexual violence. It's extremely important that school administration does not question victims if they are not trained to deal with this sort of trauma. 94% of girls who are raped experience symptoms of PTSD, and if these girls are interrogated by untrained individuals, they're at risk for being re-traumatized. And this truly can be a life or death situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Next up, we have Ms. Roberts. And after Ms. Roberts, we will hit our 30 minutes, so we'll have to vote to extend. And after Ms. Roberts is Richard Peters.
Thank you, members of the board. I'm Courtney Roberts. I have an 8th grader at Blacksburg Middle School, and I have a 2nd grader at Margaret Beeks. And I wanted to come back again and talk about the ELA curriculum because I've had some more time to think about it, and I actually have an idea that I'm hoping that you'll give real consideration to. So hearing the comments throughout the last meeting and today, it sounds like the complaint is not so much with the content of the curriculum itself as it is with the freedom that the teachers feel they have, or lack thereof, to supplement the curriculum with materials that they feel are appropriate for their own students. So to that end, I'm asking you to look maybe not at tossing the whole curriculum out with the bathwater, but let's look at that approval policy for supplemental materials. Specifically, what I'm proposing is that rather than having a policy for preliminary review and approval, in other words, a bunch of red tape that the teachers have to go through, let's toss that in favor of a presumption that a qualified, licensed, credentialed educator is going to make decisions on these materials that are going to suit the best interests of the individual needs within their own classrooms. The way I see this working out in real life is a teacher recognizes a gap in their curriculum and they can plug it right away. They can throw up the novel that they think is appropriate to fill that gap, and the education continues unimpeded. Now, I, as a concerned parent, am paying attention to what my kid is learning, and I see that my child has been instructed to read Wuthering Heights. So I, of course, make an appointment with Dr. Bird, and I say, Dr. Bird, you can't have my kid read this trash book, and I'll say it again on the record, Wuthering Heights is a trash book. They have a protagonist who's an abusive jackwagon. The rest of the characters are going around just wasting their lives, moping around on the moors. It serves no educational purpose. Now, we assume because we have hired qualified educators that this teacher is not going to have to waste a whole lot of time or energy in facing my attempt to rebut this presumption. They can simply say, yes, he is an abusive jackwagon. He's an anti-hero. He's a Byronic hero. And yes, they do mope around the moors because Bronte is using setting to establish mood. And the kids are learning about these literary techniques by reading the novel. And therefore, we've had both the opportunity for the teachers to exercise their own discretion and the opportunity for the community to be heard with their concerns without actually impeding or delaying the students' education. I really hope that you guys will give this some serious thought and consideration moving forward. I also want you to go ahead and approve collective bargaining because, I mean, come on, what's the delay at this point? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. I kind of like Wuthering Heights. So next up, we have Richard Peters, and after Richard Peters, we have Beverly Wimmer.
We need to.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to vote. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just moving along here. Do I have a motion to extend our public forum for 30 minutes?
Moved. Second.
Okay. Move second. Roll, please, Ms. Woods.
Yes. Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Now, Mr. Peters. And again, after Mr. Peters is Beverly Wimmer.
Richard Peters, I live in Christiansburg, and admittedly, I'm not an expert on ELA curriculum, and I don't know much about growth assessment, or even less about map data. But as a former college athlete and current elementary physical educator and high school coach, I'm incredibly qualified to talk about leadership and teamwork. We should all be here on the same team with the same goal. What's best for MCPS? Will each person's ideas and opinions always be right? Impossible. But I also ask, will the ideas and opinions of one person or only one group of people who all work in one certain building always be right? Our buildings are full of smart, educated, and caring people. People with, in some cases, many more years of teaching experience and undeniably much more recent teaching experience. I can't speak for all teachers, but after watching months of public address sessions, I feel that I speak for quite a few when I say we don't currently feel like a part of the team, or at least not a meaningful member. When teammates aren't listened to, there's limited buy-in. Limited buy-in hinders the success of any team. If we truly believe in what's best for MCPS, its students and employees, then we've got to get back to working together, making sure that teachers feel listened to and cared about. I was in attendance at the last board meeting 2 weeks ago when members of the audience were scolded for voicing their opinions during a presentation about secondary ELA curriculum. We were asked, how would we feel if our students treated us that way? I took that as, how would we feel if students didn't respect our knowledge and experience? To me, that wasn't the right question to ask. The right question would have been, how would we feel if the administration treated us that way, to not respect our knowledge and experience? To that, I say, welcome to the life of a teacher. This is not an attack on anyone. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's how we learn and grow together. When people feel like they're a part of something, when they feel included, it's not only easier to admit mistakes, it's easier to have grace for the mistakes of others. No one in this county has taught our students before, during, and after a pandemic. Our teachers are the only ones that can say that. We are experts too. And it's time we felt like we were a meaningful part of the team. Sam, you're killing it on the drum line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Next up is Ms. Wimmer. And after Ms. Wimmer is Summerlin Loda.
Good evening.
I'm Beverly Wimmer, and my address is Christiansburg. I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen, but more importantly, a sad grandmother. I have lived in the Auburn School District all my life. My dad, siblings, spouse, 4 children, and 7 of my 10 grandchildren have, are, or will be attending Auburn schools. I've seen bullying throughout the many years of being associated with MCPS, but this year it has hit home. I'm upset, angry, and very hurt by the things that are being allowed to happen within AMS and all the schools in MCPS. The bullying that's happening inside and outside the building is not acceptable. It is wrong. You, the board, can make a difference. My high-functioning 11-year-old 6th grade grandson has autism, my high-functioning autistic grandson, and been bullied more times than I can count since before school even started on the AMS football team. The head coach and an assistant have been alerted more than once for my grandson, and as always, they say, we'll take care of it. I cannot even begin to tell you how many other parents have had multiple conversations with them and also the AD, possibly the administration also. I do know that just in this last week, my grandson Mason was spoken to very ugly at school. Very bad language, made fun of, called names, and shoved around. And for once, he shoved back. And you know what? I'm proud of him because I've told him not to start it, but don't let somebody run over him. The assistant principal called his mom, let her know what happened. She said that she had watched the video and Mason was not at fault. Even before this happened, several of the boys on the team talked very ugly about Mason's mom and dad. Told him that they were sleeping with his mom, although it was much more graphic than just sleeping with his mom. 6th grade people. They also told him that his dad doesn't love him since he never comes to his games. Guess what? His dad works. Mason will ask me, Mimi, why do they say those things? And he is hurting. There are multiple parents that are having similar problems, and most of them are stemming from AMS football. Truly believe a lot of this could be helped if there weren't 5 or 6 daddies coaching their own kids. I call that daddy ball. Sadly, those are some of the ones bullying. Not just in school or on the field, but on the bus trips. Just last night, an 8th grader was pinched so hard, he has a terrible bruise today. Kids are crushing up medicine and putting it in drinks the other kids have. When do we say it's enough? It has to stop. Just think, with your leadership and guidance, being firm with the no bullying in MCPS, you just might help prevent a student suicide along the way. Now think about that. Stop bullying starts with you all. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wimmer. After Ms. So we have Summerlin Loda. Did I get your name right? Okay. And after Ms. Loda, we have Kelly Brennan.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Summerlin Loda. I'm a 6th grader at Blacksburg Middle School. People like to speak for kids. Adults say what they want kids to think, even if it's not true. When people ask who likes study sync, many adults say that students do, and that's not necessarily true. So it's a time a student spoke up. That's why I'm here. I sent out a survey to a lot of the 6th graders at my school. 37 students did the survey, and 73% of the students said that they do not like study sync. I asked why they didn't like it, and one person said that they don't like it because it isn't challenging and it isn't adaptable for different teachers' needs. Another student said it is not as fun as reading real literature. One student remarked that reading on the computer hurts the eyes. This is one problem that many students have that may not have been taken into consideration when an online-only textbook was chosen for our county. Personally, I do not like reading online, and I like being able to take notes during lessons, which I cannot do on StudySync. I also like it when teachers can pick and choose different activities and books that are fitting for the class. Another thing that I do not like about this is that teachers can't vary the level of reading for different students. It's too easy for some and people and too hard for others. One of the questions on my survey was if it was your choice to keep or get rid of StudySync. 77.4% of students said to get rid of it. If it's the only thing teachers are supposed to use and nobody likes it, then why do we have it? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Luda. Up next is Kelly Brennan, and after Mr. Brennan is Carola Haas.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Brennan, and I live in Reiner. Chair Koss, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, Deputy Superintendent, student members, I thank you for your time and attention. Firstly, I'd like to welcome the new superintendent. We look forward to getting to know you and to work together to provide a meaningful and empowering educational experience for all of our kids and for the people who support them. Teachers, staff, parents, this board, and this administration. Together, I truly believe we can make great things happen. I truly believe that enlightened public education is a cornerstone of true freedom. Now, I am the product of parents who were school teachers. I am a former MCPS student and a parent of an MCPS graduate. So I have a bias and an insider's perspective on some of the things we speak of in this room. In particular, my mother taught at Auburn Middle School for 22 years, and I received most of my schooling in the Auburn Strand during some of that time period. That was years ago, and while plenty has changed in educational theory and practice, things today look and sound pretty familiar. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, my mother regularly reached beyond the classroom to bring in materials, information, and ideas to make the curriculum both more accessible and relevant. She regularly reached into her pocketbook to provide those materials. She regularly stayed late to grade papers, make ready for the following day, attend club events, sporting events, and academic events. And of course, those darned teachers' meetings. She loved her kids, and not just the 4 of us at home, but the hundreds and thousands that she taught across time and space over the course of her 30-year career. As a child in the mid-70s, one thing I remember is Mom spending the night at school in a show of support for the MCEA's Sleep-In event to raise awareness of the need to better support our teachers, both professionally and financially. Her take on that experience was, that was one of the stupidest things I've ever done. Because it resulted in an additional unpaid time spent in the classroom, a poor night's sleep, and no support from the school board. Folks, that was nearly 50 years ago, and that sounds all too familiar today. We need to do better by our teachers and provide them with the tool of collective bargaining so they may more actively participate in the decisions that affect both their lives and the lives of their students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Next, we have Carola Haas. And after Ms. Haas, we have Walker Grant.
Thank you. I'm Carola Haas of Reiner, Virginia, and I'd also like to ask the board to please direct the administration to enter into a collective bargaining agreement immediately with MCEA. Our educators pour their hearts and souls into their work. They care deeply about our students and our communities. They know what is happening in the schools and where the greatest needs are. There's been a culture of disrespect from the previous administration, and collective bargaining would allow the voices of those most involved in the work to be heard. And I think a good example of the problems is what's going on with this ELA's curriculum and study sync. And I am very impressed with Summerlin's survey, official survey. I didn't do an official survey, I did an unofficial survey of parents and said, what are your kids saying about their experience this year? And the parents told me in my unofficial, non-quantitative survey, things like their kids are super annoyed, miserable, the lessons are discouraging, it's well below their previous level of learning, the kids are disappointed this year. Some parents are really worried that language learning is stalling, and parents of kids who love reading and want to do more, and kids who have struggled for years to engage their kid with reading and had some experiences, positive experiences with teachers getting that excitement and seeing that just deadened this year. So I just ask you to please show your respect for our teachers, your concern for the quality of education by moving forward with the collective bargaining agreement. And I know that it's up to the administration to enter that, but if you can enforce the administration to move forward with the collective bargaining agreement, as well as taking up the suggestion that Courtney Roberts had of giving permission to teachers to use materials that they have used before, that they know work, and trusting them, giving them the support, as Mr. Sauter said, giving them the support when those materials are challenged. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. Next, we have Walker Grant. Is Walker Grant here? Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next, which is Ethan Ryan. Okay. Morgan Taylor. Do I have the right list? Okay, well, after that is Crow Sindelar. Okay, I'm really doing badly here. Joanne Price.
Good evening. I'm Joanne Price, Blacksburg, Virginia. Just recently, the Lynchburg City School Board rejected a collective bargaining resolution. They are the second school board recently in the state of Virginia to reject such a resolution. Albemarle County School Board did as well. The reasons they cited were cost and expense. The petition that was brought forth was signed by 90% of the Lynchburg Public School bus drivers, assistants, mechanics, and they were talking about a seat at the table. The petition was largely rejected, according to several board members, due to financial undertaking that it would have required from the school division. Dr. Bob Brennan, Vice Chair of the LCS Board, said he believes transportation employees should have a seat at the table, but it should be done by avoiding the bureaucracy and legal intervention of a collective bargaining contract. Brennan also added that his concern is that the financial cost and the time spent by LCS administration will take away from the LCS budget, and it would, more importantly, from the educational initiatives that affect our ability to address the challenges facing our goal of providing the best possible education for students. He said he was optimistic that this could be done with the school board sitting around the table and not across the table. Other board members also agreed. Martin Day believes that collective bargaining, he's a board member, would cost several $100,000 per year. Day said the cost needs to be weighed against competing LCS needs and resources, such as the pay increase to teachers and support staff that the board has been trying to find ways to finance. And those are some of the questions we've been asking as well. What about the cost factors? Where is that money going to come from? Taxpayers, of course, is the answer. Another board member warned that collective bargaining would bring a financial hurricane which they could not handle in the district. They don't have any control over revenues, they said. We depend on state and the city to give us the money, and we go with our handout each year, and I'm sure you do too. We've heard those comments. He said, give me a little bit of money so we can match the salary increase the state is proposing. Knowing that, group just said, it would be a disservice to all of the employees of LCS agreeing to a 4-year, 2-year, 3-year contract and not knowing in good faith that you cannot control that. And it goes on and on. He said, let's
Ms.
solve the
Price,
problem.
I'm sorry, your time's up. Thank you. Next up, we have Harlan Lustgarten. And after Mr. Lustgarten, we have Chris Thomas.
Thank you, for board members and Madam Chair. We all want to do what's best for all the students in the district. The best way to accomplish that, and that is best for all the students, is to do what's best for the teachers, which is collective bargaining for the MCPS staff and faculty, which the majority support to do the collective bargaining for the faculty staff. The anti-collective bargaining attitude is just another divide and conquer strategy. They put out misconceptions. The teachers can't strike. It's against the law. They can't cause the taxes to go up. You don't make taxes, the board does. And half of the money, approximately half of the money, comes from the state and the federal government to support the school system. There will not be outside union negotiators, from what I understand, on the MCEA. Nobody, no matter how much they love their job, wants to work for free. I've had jobs that I love, but it wasn't worth not being paid for. Asking to work overtime, after school, without additional remuneration is unacceptable, even if you're salaried. The faculty staff want to be able to negotiate things like set the number of work hours in a week. After school hours spent adds up in time. Limit the amount of personal development hours required for the year. Be able to set that amount. A limit of required meetings and their frequency and time in their time frame. Lunch breaks, bathroom breaks, downtime during the day was something they were asking for, I understand. These are all would make a better school system, a stronger school system, cooperation between faculty, staff, and administration. Thank you for the time to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Lusgard. Up next is Chris Thomas, and after Mr. after Mr. Thomas is Linda Hicks.
Earlier this week, one of my children told me they'd encountered the telltale heart in school, or more specifically, 5 paragraphs of it, because that's what StudySync makes available. Members of the board, I assume you're all educated and well-read, so I'm going to read you 5 paragraphs from one of the seminal novels of the 20th century, one I'm sure you know. See if you can identify it. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes, 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him, and what a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink, and if the muscles of his jaw stretched imperceptibly, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought, now that I think of it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there in the street so damn late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon had set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut, the chamber a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. Show of hands. Who can identify the work? This is a much beloved novel. Given the topics before this board as of late, you should have all read it. If you couldn't identify it, how could you possibly understand it in just 5 paragraphs? But that's all StudySync lets our children read. 5 paragraphs. Just enough of the text for you to hate something, but probably not enough to love it. Reading like that might render our children competent in sentence structure, the parsing of punctuation, the variance of vocabulary, but 5 paragraphs will not a reader make. If we placed those 5 paragraphs before our students, they might appreciate the lilt of the language, the subtly intimate phrasing, the rhythm of the paragraph structure, but will they care about the characters? Can they empathize with them, appreciate their struggle, or see some of their own in it? Of course not. 5 paragraphs does not a reader make. Books are about more than words on a page or the placement of clauses in a sentence. They're about ideas, big, complex, wonderful ideas. The nouns and the verbs, the antecedents and the prepositions aren't the point, they're the medium, the means by which we open our children's eyes to a world that is bigger than they ever dared dream, a world full of vibrant characters, spectacular vistas, challenging thoughts much too big to fit in a brief excerpt, because 5 paragraphs does not a reader make. To return to our mystery text, there must be something in books, things we can't imagine, to make a woman stay in a burning house. There must be something there. You don't stay for nothing. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Next up is Linda Hicks, and after Ms. Hicks is Nina Templeton.
Good evening, everyone. I think I do not teach English, but I think that their restriction and their creativity has blossomed quite well this evening. It's been entertaining to hear them. I am here to discuss the, by comparison, much more boring topic of teacher pay. My name is Linda Hicks. I am an MCPS teacher. I have a master's degree and more than 6 years teaching experience. I work in Christiansburg, I live in Blacksburg, and I am the mother of 3 Blacksburg students. I will be introducing you to tonight why I made each of those points in my introduction and how they relate to the issue tonight, which is I am struggling to pay my bills. First point, I am an MCPS teacher. Teachers are overworked. If I had a dime for every time I heard, yeah, teachers are overworked and underpaid, I'd be rich and I wouldn't be in this predicament. We are overworked, but that's a separate presentation. And that means that my teacher's salary is my source of income. There isn't time for me to hold 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet because I have to pour so much into my job as a teacher. Teaching is also a profession. I am paid a salary, not hourly. I had to go to school to be trained in my field. Theoretically, I should not be struggling to live. My second point, I have a master's degree and over 6 years teaching experience. I received a 5% increase in salary this year over last year. And I want you to remember that number because you'll hear it again this evening. I work in Christiansburg and I live in Blacksburg. This means that I have to drive to work Monday through Friday and any weekends that I need to go in to get my work done. Inflation, or gas prices are up nearly 50% over last year. My personal car insurance premium jumped 54% over last month. They cited increasing costs of medical care and car repair services as their reason for jumping it up so high. I've been a customer with them for 17 years and I have 6 discounts applied. And yet I struggle to pay the premium as it was originally. So paying the increased rate is not feasible for me. On my way to work this morning, I cried because I thought I was going to have to go uninsured for the first time in my life. And I am 40, for the record. Blacksburg housing is expensive. I live in low-income housing. My teacher salary qualified me for low-income housing. My leaser attempted to raise my rent this year for over last year by over 9%, and I talked them down to just under 5%. My teacher salary qualified me for subsidized daycare from 2018 to 2022. My teacher salary qualified me this year to receive a discount on my internet bill. I am the mother of 3 Blacksburg students. The cost of food to feed a family has risen 10%. General inflation is up 8.3%. My family of 4 qualified for reduced meals. My teacher salary qualified me. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ms. Hicks, I have to stop you. Thank you. And Nina Templeton, and then the last person on the list is Emily Loda.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Nina Templeton from Blacksburg. I have 3 children who graduated from our schools listening to our mission statement. They came out as very well educated and very well-rounded people and adults. Thank you. I also, since 2015, with my golden retriever, have been honored to be a therapy dog team at Falling Branch Elementary. Many of you may have heard of Lyle. In my time at Falling Branch as an outsider looking in, has been really amazed by the diversity of our students and the kindness and professionalism with which our teachers go ahead and educate all of these kids. I have a feeling this is not unique to Falling Branch. I have a feeling it's throughout our whole school system. I guess I want to implore you in listening today to listen to our teachers. They know our kids. They know how the school has to run. Please, listen to them, both in terms of curriculum and also in terms of collective bargaining. The other thing I would implore you is read our mission statement. When I listen to the things that our governor is coming up with respect to transgender and other students, please don't abandon our mission students and mission statement, and don't abandon our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Templeton. And next is Emily Loda.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Emily Loda. I represent Blacksburg as a parent of 2 middle schoolers and Christiansburg as a teacher. Tonight, I would like to make sure you are aware of a continuing issue in this county. The teachers of MCPS are being silenced. We're being told to watch what we say online, in the community, and even here in public forums such as this. One central office decision at a time, we are being stripped of our autonomy in the classroom and told to quiet our concerns by those that have not been in the classroom for a decade or more. We deserve the respect to be the trained professionals that we are. We deserve a seat at the table. We deserve autonomy in our classrooms. Tonight, I ask that you ensure that we are working for a central office that appreciates us, our efforts, and respect the work we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Loda. And that concludes our public address. We didn't have to go to the next 30. So I'm going to move on to our financial reports. Payment of the bills. Do I have a motion to approve the payment of the bills?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Woods, will you please call roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. The financial summary report for July. Do I have a motion to accept or to acknowledge receipt of the financial summary report for July?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Woods, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Do I have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the financial summary report for August?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Woods, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to the business portion of our meeting. First, the board retreat agenda items, which we have passed on for the last three meetings because it was so late at night, our brains couldn't soak it in. So we will be holding our school board retreat on October 21st and 22nd. Dr. Bragan will be joining us for the retreat. We will need to finalize agenda items for the retreat so our administrative team can complete planning for the event. There are a few in your board docs. There are a few proposed. Hold on a second. I lost my page. Here we go. There we go. We had a few proposed topics in our board docs. A bylaws review, standards of quality review, school board budget analysis. That's all three of those are very exciting items. And then team building. So other than that, I think we need to fill in the gaps a little bit. So are there any suggestions?
Parliamentary procedure.
Parliamentary procedure? Didn't we do some of that last time? I guess we never really.
We need more.
We need more. Okay.
I have a question. In terms of the bylaws review, I know our policies are kind of broken up, and that first section is bylaws. Is that exclusively the section we're talking about there, or are we able to discuss other policies, tangential? Or I'm not sure who I'm asking here.
I was going to say, I just offered it as a recommendation in terms of topics that came up. And it was one that we had on the summer retreat as a topic. So you could certainly discuss any policies that the board would choose to do. The recommendation there was looking at those policies and then the board really working it together to decide what does that mean to this board in terms of those bylaws.
Okay, great, yeah. for me, there's some policies in there that address communications between the board and personnel that I think are important for us to review, but they kind of spill over into some of the other sections as well. So just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to discuss those. Even spills over into our norms and protocols as well. So I'm not sure how much of that is on the table. But.
Sure. Yeah, I think those would likely be pulled in because they're referenced, right, those norms and protocols, so that you all will have them. So that would make a lot of sense, Mr. Linwood.
I think it'd be worth reviewing them, especially if Dr. Briggin's going to be there, because this is an opportunity for him to kind of be introduced into board procedure. And so, you know, I'd like to use this as an opportunity to help him get acclimated to our environment. I mean, clearly he's a superintendent and he has a board, but their procedures are different and it's a different state. So maybe that's even a separate bullet point, just items that might be important for him to become more knowledgeable about that he might not have encountered before. Mr. Jabaka, you look like you want to say something.
So for me, there's at least 3 topics that I would like to talk about that have basically come up in the last month or two, or more recently even, many of them centered around the ELA issue. You know, we heard it from the last speaker there, and it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time that we hear it, about staff feeling like they're being silenced. And I'm not aware of this board ever passing any policy that silences staff or tells them that they can't come talk to us about things of concern there. I mean, it's evident to me from the presentation that Ms. Whitaker gave us, I don't even remember exactly how many weeks ago now, but it's evident that the previous administration used tactics of fear, intimidation, and deception to get their way. And I spoke previously about getting buy-in from stakeholders and how important that is and how we've talked about that so much. And then we find ourselves in the situation that we're in right now. And, you know, I mean, I can save the bulk of what I want to say about this ELA issue for unfinished business, but I think that for me, silencing of staff is that could be a whole conversation, and I think a worthwhile one. I think the ELA issue and how to deal with it, I mean, I'm ready to take action tonight on that. I don't know how much more we need to hear. And I think the process for getting buy-in and what that looks like, I mean, one of the things that attracted me to Bernie so much was from the beginning, he talked about that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And it was refreshing to hear somebody come in and you ask them, what's your leadership style? How do you do things? That type of thing. And they're immediately talking about their staff. They're immediately talking about, I mean, he just showed respect to his staff in the interview and said, they're the experts. I need their opinion. I need their input. I need their buy-in. And I doubt I was the only board member that, you know, that resonated with. And so I think with him being there and with us dealing with these issues in real time, I mean, I just think, you know, those are the 3 things that come to mind, and I'm happy to expand on any of those if anybody wants me to.
We can, I do think any further discussion on ELA we should do during unfinished business, not at this point. With the board retreat, we can bring that up in unfinished business if we want to continue speaking about that. But it sounds like what you're saying is, you know, that's, you know, staff, respect of staff and feeling of respect, or the lack of feeling of respect that teachers are having. I think maybe thinking about other concerns and issues we've had to address over the last year or so might be helpful to kind of get Dr. Bragin up to speed on some of the things he might get ambushed on right in the beginning, you know, issues that he's going to have to immediately, the mic, I'm going up and down. Things that he's going to have to, you know, immediately hit the ground running, dealing with. I think it would be helpful to identify what some of those things might be.
I mean, I think, if I may respond to that, I'm in agreement with you, but I did also want to point out another thing that Dr. Bragan had said in the interview that really resonated with me, that I think is important to this, and I think adds to why I think it's something we should talk about. You know, we asked candidates questions, and one of the questions that we asked is for them, you know, we assumed that they had looked at our website and things like that, and we asked them, you know, what do you think? What issues do you see from just, you know, looking from afar? And, you know, he was able to zero in, and I don't know how many minutes of, you know, small time frame of looking at our website, zero in on some data for what our attrition rate is, and basically identify that that's a problem. So everything that these teachers have been coming up and saying for the past half year or more, he was able to just zero in on a piece of data and say, this is a problem and we need to fix it. And so if he identified that to us during that process, I would think that it would be a topic that's worth putting on the agenda to speak with him about, because I do think that it is a timely topic, and I don't want to lose any of our teachers at all, especially not our ELA teachers right now.
Anything else anybody want to add at this point? Okay. Well, we will keep thinking, and let me know if you have any other suggestions. I'm going to move on then to the next topic, which is the Montgomery County Educational Foundation, the ECEF, their 2022 fall grant cycle.
Thank you. I should leave that on, I'm sorry. Dr. Schultz is here to answer any questions you may have about the grant application submitted for this year's MCEF grant cycle.
So these are the projects that are being requested?
Yes, these are that's a great question. So these are all of the grants that have been submitted. They have not yet gone to MCEF for their process for approval, but our policies require that all grants and gifts come to the board first. And so this is just bringing them all to you as they're being proposed, and then they will be given to the Education Foundation. The foundation will go through their review process, but it's really just letting you all know what's being turned in according to board policy.
Okay.
Then we'll be notified after they select which ones they approve.
So there's no action necessary here?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We do need the board to approve the grants.
Oh, so we are, okay, we have
Oh,
to.
I apologize.
We have to approve.
You approve them, and then MCEF will select which ones receive the funding, and then Mr. Schultz will be notified about the funding. But in
Okay,
order
so-
to submit for the funding, the board has to approve the grants and concept.
Okay, so we do need to have a motion then.
Yes, please. I motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Ms. Woods, can you call the roll, please?
Sorry, turned off and on. Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Next up is the supplemental appropriation. Ms. Whitaker?
Yes, Ms. Miano has provided us information for a supplemental appropriation request for funds that have been received for various state and federal grants and reimbursements of expenditures. She's here to address any questions you may have regarding the supplemental appropriation.
Okay. Is approval necessary?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the supplemental appropriation?
I motion.
Second.
Ms. Woods, if you could call the roll, please?
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Chewbacca?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Okay, next we have the categorical budget transfer.
As part of our budget process for this school year, the budget was evaluated to align more closely with the actual expenditure lines related to salary and benefits, as well as the purchase of materials and supplies. And so you see here that categorical budget transfer, and Ms. Miano is still here to address any questions you may have.
Any questions from the board? Does anybody wish to make a motion regarding the categorical budget transfer?
A motion that we put in place the categorical budget transfer that's been requested.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Ms. Woods, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bond? Yes. Mr. Trabaka?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson? Yes. Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Next up is collective bargaining. It is on here as an update, and I think the discussion was to put together a timeline of where we were headed with collective bargaining. So, I open the floor up to discussion.
So I believe we should schedule a meeting to restart the process of approving a resolution to be approved by this board for collective bargaining.
I agree with that. I think that, I feel like we were close in our last meeting. We had a couple of details we need to iron out, and then we got busy with superintendent stuff, and we owe it to the teachers to get back to that and get something finalized to send out so we can vote on this darn thing. So,
Does that need to be a separate meeting, or is that just something that goes on the agenda?
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know what exactly it is that.
Well, I think where we are
Franklin
headed,
was-
I'm sorry, Marty, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I was part of his question. Are we finished with working through things with the lawyer? I don't think we
No,
are.
I think what we need, the next step is to finalize the resolution, or at least our review of the resolution
That's just what I said.
with the attorney. Okay.
Okay.
And then, so that would be the first thing to set up. But you'd said set up a meeting, Penny, but, right, so we need to set that up with the attorney, so that would be a closed session. And we can set that up for the next meeting or if we have to have a special meeting for availability, we could do that.
Pleasure of the board. Do you want us to reach out to Ms. Hudson and then follow up with the board?
Well, can we finish discussing,
Okay, let's
I guess,
finish.
before
yeah.
we
I was just going step
take
by step
any
here.
action on that?
So after that, after the resolution is, we've finished that piece, then it would be meeting with, I believe, and I'm, Ms. Whitaker, Ms. Franklin, you're more familiar with all this, would be meeting with the MCEA to then present to them, okay, so here's what we're thinking, and to have a meeting with them and have discussion. Does that seem accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So then we would need to then set up that would be the next meeting we'd have to do.
I think you'd want to be sure to advertise that for any interested employee group as you identified in your original motion months ago.
Say that again?
Any interested employee group.
Right,
At this
not just
point,
the
we are not
MCEA.
yet able to.
Right.
Any interested group, correct, you are correct on that.
Well, I thought that we did put that out months ago, that we were in the process of looking at collective bargaining, and if there were any other entities interested in, that was the time for them to speak up.
I think what she's referencing is not other organizations from the outside that would help to facilitate collective bargaining. She's speaking about our employee groups, so not just the teacher group, but support staff or whatever those other groups that may identify. Is that what you're referencing, Ms. Drake?
I believe the last advice from Ms. Hudson, and I may be speaking out of turn, was that we're not yet at the point where we can narrow the option. So if you're having a meeting, it needs to be a meeting with any interested employee group. Obviously, MCEA is going to be at the table. But I think I thought that Ms. Hudson had advised that there were some issues with narrowing that focus prior to the resolution being approved.
So she did. I think the employee group is where, it's not our employee group. So I think that's the difference there in our language. But I do think that Ms. Franklin is right, that you had posted that out.
Yeah,
If
I
you're
do
speaking
remember-
about
I
those
remember that, yeah.
organizations, then yes, that is correct.
And as far as employee group, the resolution that was given to us by MCEA included different units, so we don't have separate conversations with different groups of employees. I'm not clear on if we're saying the same thing or something different.
Well, the bus drivers, for instance, can put together their own group to come to the table with us. And it would be separate than, for instance, what the MCEA has put together.
Well,
So we just need to make sure we're giving everyone the opportunity to come to the table.
okay,
So,
let's
I
drag
think-
it out a little more.
I'm sorry. Sounds like we need to get that clarified. So,
Have we given a public summary of where we are in this process? Or have we only talked about it in?
well, I think that's kind of what we're doing right now. I mean, we have at this point.
We were having a discussion, but we never had a public summary, but nobody gave a summary on where we
I
are.
think what we've just been discussing
Yeah, this
is the
is
summary
the
of what's
summary.
gone
I
on
mean,
and what we
basically,
still
we
need to
have
do.
the yeah, there was we had approved looking at a resolution. Everybody knows that. We had said we would look at the resolution. We agreed to do that. And then we have been, they presented their, MCA presented a resolution to us, and then we've been looking at the resolution, and we've been working with our attorneys. We've had a lot of other things going on, so it has not been in the forefront of all of our meetings, so we want to get moving on it, because we have been kind of sitting on it for a little bit.
Yeah.
And so now we need to finalize what our thoughts are on the resolution, which I think we're close to there. I think the last meeting we were pretty close, but we weren't quite there yet. And then we move to the next step, which is sitting with whomever. We need to figure out who it is we're sitting with, but sitting with MCEA and if others, to then discuss that resolution.
Right.
Now, after that happens, that's when I get a little fuzzy.
I'm not sure I agree with what you said, but I'll talk about that later. You guys go ahead and go on.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that, collective bargaining, once we put it in place, it's in place. We can't take things away in that agreement. We can add things later on, but we can't take them away. So I think it's really important for us to spend the right amount of time to get our initial steps first and make an initial decision on at least what we have to, so that we can get this process started. But it's not something that's quick and easy, like somebody mentioned earlier. It is very time consuming. This is brand new for the state of Virginia. There's not a playbook. There's some sample, procedures, but again, I think it's our due diligence to spend as much time at the beginning of this to get it started off on the right foot than it is to rush it.
Well, I can't say that since February that this is rushing anything. Absolutely, we need to do our due diligence, but when we're really not, and quite frankly, we have not, I don't care what else we've had on our plates, it's time to do the respect that we need and that we've said we would do to our employees and act on this. It is not as complicated as everyone wants to make this, and that includes our attorney.
Well, I think, let me make sure I understand what the next steps are after. So we've got 2 steps we've already outlined. If we're putting together a timeline here, I think it's helpful to understand what's going to be on the timeline. So what comes after, so we meet with whomever.
I think at that point, it comes to the board for a first review and potential public hearing, and then a second meeting for possible approval. Those would be my recommended steps. The public hearing, I think, is just in the best interest for communication.
So after MCEA looks at the resolution and we figure out if this is something that we can do, then it comes to the board, public hearing, and then there's a vote.
Okay. So, looks like 3 major steps here. Do I have that right? So, we need to set up a meeting to finalize our input on the resolution. And so we need, I guess, sometime, we could either do it at the next meeting. I will not be here, and I don't think Penny's going to be here either.
I won't be here for that meeting.
What do we do if neither one of us is here?
We do also, I'm sorry, we do also have something already, one meeting that will be before the next meeting for some student matters.
Okay.
So, you know.
That we could add, I mean, we can do it as a special meeting. It doesn't have to be the next meeting. But neither Penny or, just curious, what does happen if neither Penny and I are here?
Board members are here, who are here, elect a chair pro tem. I've already added that to the agenda for that meeting, so they'll choose from the members who are present to be the chair for that
I mean,
meeting.
I'll be calling in, but I can't be physically here.
I believe that the chair of the board has to be present to
Right.
be chairing the meeting. And so they would still, the people who are here, the first item of business is to elect the chair. They can't even adopt an agenda until that chair has been elected, which means they also can't approve electronic participation. And so it would be from the board members who are present. They would do a pro tem. It's just for that meeting. That's what pro tem means. We got it covered. We've done it before.
Okay, just curious. So do we want to try to get that in the next couple of weeks?
So when is the meeting with the students?
I thought we were doing that at 6 o'clock on October 4th. Is there a separate meeting that we were considering?
No, I think that's the same one we're talking about.
October, yeah, and Sue, neither one of us are going to be here.
Okay.
I mean, I'd rather us, I'd like to be present for that, but and if I can, I can. I'm going to be gone from October 4th through the rest of that week. I can Zoom in, because I'll be in New Jersey, but I can't.
For the amount of time that it has taken us to have discussions, I believe it needs to be a separate meeting so that we can concentrate and focus on that and not having to start another meeting or do something else, another matter. It needs to be just on collective bargaining.
I agree.
I agree with that, because if we do it as a closed session prior to one of these, we're going to be pinched in on time. And if we do it after, it may be 11 o'clock, and we're going to be a
Also,
little fried.
we got to get on the attorney's calendar, and her calendar is probably not the easiest to get on, so.
Could we do something next week, hypothetically? Or is that too soon?
Next week.
Before you all go out of town?
We could reach out to her and see, get a couple dates and times that she has available, and then poll the board to see which of those work for you all.
Penny, Jamie, are you not available next week? No? You're not either? Oh. Okay, Daniel.
I may not be either.
Okay, well, see, here we go. So it's going to have to be then after.
That's the second meeting in October, second week in October.
Okay.
Yeah.
She likely, with that much time, can meet when you would need her to. I mean, I can't
Okay.
guarantee, but that gives enough time. She usually can
Yeah,
plan.
the week of the 10th.
Okay.
If we could get something in that. So do we have a meeting? We have a meeting the 4th, and then when's our next meeting after that? Do we not have? We don't have one on the 18th, do we? Or do we?
We have one the 18th, and then we have the retreat.
And then the
21st
retreat,
and
okay.
22nd. So that's about, I don't want to add any other meetings to that week.
Yeah. No, I don't either. Okay, let's see if we can.
Wait a minute. So we have the meeting on the 18th. We're talking about the second week.
Yeah, we're talking about the week of the 10th, October 10th through 14th, trying to set it up that week.
Right.
Does that work for most people?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Drake, if you could see if you can get that on Ms. Hudson's schedule, that'd be awesome. And then we'll see where we go from there, and then it would be trying to get on, then we would have to bring it to, get on a calendar date for the next piece.
So, since we've gone off and scheduled and everything, can I go back to, can I have a chance to speak on
No.
what okay.
I'm kidding. Sorry. Go ahead.
So back at the beginning of the year, when we approved a resolution to essentially get the ball rolling, I think that there was some confusion on exactly how that process worked. And again, I agree with what Marty's saying. This is a new thing, and we've even gotten, I would say, competing information from lawyers on this. And so, yes, we do need to be careful. But the part of this process that frustrates me is that I thought leadership was going to go off and craft a resolution that would allow us as a board to sit down with the bargaining unit, which is the MCEA, to talk about what things we were willing to put on the table to allow for bargaining. And what happened instead, what ended up happening is we had a long delay. So we talk about rushing things and not rushing things. You know, if you have to do your homework or something and you have a week to do it and you wait 6 days and then, you know, the last night before you're rushing it out, you're still rushing your homework, right? And I feel like we have not had that conversation, and I think that needs to be somewhat of a back and forth conversation, you know, to find out what are the things that teachers, that other staffs would like to bargain about. The resolution that came out that we saw recently basically was everything. And yeah, we can be expedient and we can put that up to a vote. My vote's going to be a no on that, right? I want to have discussion with the people that want to have a seat at the table about what it means to have a seat at the table, what topics. And so that's where I would like to go on this. And I have not... Yeah, and then, of course, with the superintendent search, I think, you know, that got delayed. So whatever the next, you know, this idea that we're really close on a resolution, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that we are not close. I think there are so many pieces of that resolution when I reviewed it that I could not support. And we've not had a chance to sit around a table even and have each of us going, Jamie, what would you support? What could you support? What could you not support? Marty, what about you? Len, what? We haven't had that conversation as a board. So I don't think it's fair to say that
Mark,
we're
we sat in a
close.
meeting. For how many hours did we sit in a
We
meeting?
just haven't agreed upon ourselves.
I don't think you were there, actually. You were calling in maybe, but we sat at a table two different times. We sat at our retreat we talked about, or not our retreat, whatever that was. And when we had a couple different meetings.
But we haven't had that talk about what are those things.
Okay, so in the beginning, it was decided that there would be a committee made up of the chair and vice chair, administration, and representatives from MCEA. And that happened. We sat down, we came up with a draft of the resolution. The folks who are saying this is what we need, we had that conversation. Then it went to the attorney. And then the attorney came back and said, oh, wait, we got to do this and got to do that. And quite frankly, blown a lot of smoke about you got to do this, it costs this much money, and the board's going to be hung up with all this stuff, which is not true. And at the last meeting, when I called her on that stuff, by the end of the meeting, she was agreeing with the board member when I was explaining those things. That is not how things happen. Things do not get hung up because there are processes as to how it works. And once you come up with an agreement, then that's it. So to say that we have not had many discussions with this, we have met with the attorney at least 3 times around this. And I agree with you. We are not close. Not like we should be at this point. And we need to get off of the pot and get this done.
That's what my mom used to say.
It is. Well, I was going to say something.
Well,
but
she didn't say
anyway.
exactly. She said it a little more graphically, but.
So we need to, as a board, do just what we've been talking about, and that is decide what it is we want to see in the resolution, and then sit down and have a conversation if this is agreeable, if it will work. And then we as a board agree that this is what we want to have put in front of the board and in front of the community as to this is what we are looking at as far as a resolution to be able to move into collective bargaining. It is really not that complicated. It is not. It's only as complicated as it is made.
I thought that's what we were going to start talking about tonight, to hear what it is that people want and that type of thing, but you guys seem to think we're a lot further along than I do, but it's fine. And I think the opinions of, we have a lawyer that's advising us on this, and I think that if we want to have the back and forth, we can. But I think editorializing on certain opinions and things with the lawyer, I think, is also problematic, so.
Well, it's the truth, plain and simple. You talk about experience. I've got experience, and I know what has been going on, and I've called it for what it is. Fear tactics. And it needs to stop. We need to be advised, and that's it.
Well, I think we need to set this meeting and make sure we make it for enough time that we can have some really serious conversation, not a 1-hour meeting, where we feel pressed for time, where we really sit down and we make a concerted effort to work through. I think I have to disagree with you, Mark. We did a lot the last time. We did a lot of looking at the language and looking at a lot of items. Not all of us agreed on everything, but I do think we started talking about quite a bit. And I think now, after we've had that meeting and if we really sit down and put some serious thought, maybe we can get I guess, would we be using the same document, or did we made some changes the last time, correct? So
There were a few. I think the way it ended was there were a couple of suggestions that the attorney made that she was sending us drafts of different language from different areas for us to look at.
Correct.
And then we were supposed to get back together and talk about those.
Right. So I think that's what we need to do. And we need to make a concerted effort to try to come to a conclusion if possible. Both you and Mark seem to feel we're far away. I'm not quite sure how far, if that's hours away or days away, but I think we're a little closer than maybe you guys think. But
Ms. Cass, does 3 hours sound good when you say enough time?
I think that would be reasonable.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, this agenda item was to set up a timeline.
Right.
That's
Yeah, it
what
was
we're
not to have, it was to set up a timeline, not to discuss it. We need our attorney to be able to discuss it.
Board
and
members will
that's gotta be
discuss
done in
updates
closed.
related to the collective bargaining process. It's more than timeline, sorry.
I made that up.
What was that?
I made it up.
Yeah.
The sentence, sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
We did talk about a timeline, and because I remember Linwood talking about that, and that was what we discussed. And I think that, let's dedicate that 3 hours to and that's all we focus on, and make sure we don't get sidetracked. Okay. Are we okay with moving on to the next topic? Okay. Policy 7-3.1, Student Code of Conduct, first reading. Ms. Whitaker.
As part of our policy revision process for this year, this policy was assessed by the Code of Conduct Committee to make sure the policy is aligned closely with legislative updates and new mandates from the VDOE and model guidance for positive and preventative code of conduct policy and alternatives to suspension. Dr. Johnson is here to address any questions you have regarding this policy. And this is just the first reading, as you said.
Dr. Johnson, I had a question on remind me again how we're using the color coding here. I know usually any changes to the policy are in red, but when I was going over it, there was a bunch of stuff in purple as well. What's the difference there?
Yes, sir. It should just be based on suggested revisions and updates, just for font size, just for rewording. So it should be throughout, some from the Code of Conduct Committee and then some also from the School Board Attorney's Office.
So what does red mean versus what does purple or blue mean?
Red means just for, just strike through and just rewording, and then purple means just font size.
Oh, it's just oh, I see, okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
anything in purple was just a formatting change then? Not a wording change, is that correct?
Should have been a formatting change. I don't have the document in front of me. Let me pull it up, sir.
All right.
Can you
Up
see
on
it
the
on that
screen.
screen right there, Dr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay, go back up, sorry. So yes, sir, so the information in red is just rewording in that sentence, and then the information in purple is just new information added from legislative policy codes and updates.
Okay, so the purple's the new stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the mandatory part or something?
Yes, sir, that's based
Okay.
on legislative updates. Yes, sir.
Got it, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And the red is for?
Just additions in reference to sentence structure or, and just rewording the part of that sentence. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the red is what MCPS is added?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So this monitoring for disparities of outcomes and opportunities is something that the state has asked us to do?
Yes, sir. This came in from legislative updates as well as
Gotcha.
Information from model guidance in the VDOE. Yes, sir.
All right, great, thank you.
The discipline matrix and teacher classroom managed behavior matrix,
Yes, ma'am.
are those things that are required by the state?
That was required from the Virginia Department of Education as we
okay.
are transitioning from trying to transition to make policies more equitable, more fair, more consistent, and then how we manage discipline throughout the state and trying to make sure that we exhaust all possibilities before suspension.
Is that something we do already, or is that brand new?
Yes, ma'am.
We do now.
Something we're already doing anyway?
Yes, ma'am. It's already in place. Yes, ma'am.
Well, there's a lot here to read.
Not that many changes, actually, but a lot of purple changes, so that's why I was asking.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's possible to get kind of like a high-level summary of some of the changes. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but I don't know if that's possible or not.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was gonna say. Can you give me the Cliff Notes version of all the changes?
Some major themes.
Yeah, so when you look at many of these suggested revisions as well as updates, they were based on trying to clean up the document to make it more easily reading for our parents and students. Based on past drafts of this document, we had new updates that were just a paragraph or two just stuck in there to try to make it up to date with new revisions from policy codes and updates. So we actually went through the document, tried to make it more easy to read, easier to comprehend for many of our students and parents. But then also we tried to make the document more accessible to what we were doing to problem solve around students at the school level, how we are trying to collaborate with parents and trying to make it a document that is supported by the entire division in the community.
So it truly reflects what we do in Montgomery County.
Yes, ma'am. As we are transitioning, how are we more equitable? How are we more fair? How are we consistent on how we deal with behavior issues across the board? And how are we consistently looking at the situation that took place? How are we providing restorative practices? How are we problem solving around that particular student and that particular incident as we try to make sure that we support our students? We make sure they receive a proper education in MCPS.
So this policy somewhat aligns or helps explain the suspension and the expulsion.
This
They are
policy,
connected.
this policy is more so in student code of conduct,
Right.
expectations set forth in our staff. The next one is for suspension expulsion.
Right, but what I'm saying is, what we do or how things are expected to happen with the student codes of conduct directly impacts the suspension and the expulsion.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
You can just stay for a second for the next one. And
Yes,
see if
ma'am.
there's questions for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the next one is suspension and expulsion.
Correct. So Dr. Johnson here is to address your questions regarding suspension and expulsion policy revisions. As we shared with the previous one, this was assessed by his Code of Conduct Committee, as well as our attorneys.
Doesn't look like there's any changes.
It looks just like sections were updated throughout,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
References to the section.
Yes, sir.
change. So I don't think the policy is changing to any significant.
No, sir, not at all.
Is the matrix itself different, or is it the same, or?
No, sir, the matrix is the same, but we, just based on information shared from my attorney's office, we want to make it accessible to our parents. So we put a link there, so as parents are reading through the policy, they can click on the matrix and see what the matrix entails.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
So these updates reflect the information that we received last spring from our attorney as to the processes and procedures that we need to make sure we're following.
Yes, ma'am.
Questions? Discussion? Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are you
Thank you.
here for the next one, too? No.
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, Ms. Drake is here for the next one. And our next policy is 5-6.1, Employee Behavior in Online Environments. That is a new title from the previous policy. Previously, it was called, sorry, I should have this in my list. I apologize.
Standards of staff conduct.
There you go, Standards of Staff Conduct. So this policy is updated to include distinctions between personal and professional use of social media channels, especially as it relates to the posting of photos from inside of the school building or posting information that an employee only has access to as a result of their job. The adjustments to this policy provide an additional layer of clarity and protection for staff, in addition to providing the district with a way to curate social media posts by staff members. Ms. Drake's here to address any questions you may have.
What brought up the revision of this policy?
What was your question?
What brought up the revision? Why are we?
So we were required by state legislation to adopt a policy in 2013 that addressed behavior in online environments, and that was part of our legislative updates. We've been needing to update this policy for several years. First of all, the title itself isn't specific enough. And then we really wanted to provide clarity for our staff members that what you do on personal social media, what you say on your personal social media is different than professional social media where you're sharing from inside of our schools. And so we really wanted to provide that distinction there. Now, sharing information that is already publicly available, even though it's about the school system, is different. Sharing information that only you have as a result of your employment with us, that is what that professional use. So if I am on a Twitter chat just talking in general about my job, that's okay. It's that confidential, that privileged information that you get in your role as an employee.
And then also, we are supposed to, and we're trying to get back on track, we are supposed to bring every policy to the board every 5 years. And so in looking at getting that happening, as we work through them and say, hey, this is something that we might need to look at, we're trying to bring them before the board while we're working to create a formal process for bringing every single policy to you every 5 years.
So in the professional social media use, the second paragraph,
Yeah.
isn't what we're saying here really that you cannot showcase work inside your classroom on your personal social media account, isn't it? Or is it not? I had a rough time with that one. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction was like, we're going to ask for people's usernames and passwords, you know? But then when I read it a second time, it seems to just basically say, you have to use an official account if you are going to do that.
Yeah,
right?
and not the password, view access. So it's if you're going to be posting about it, remember, the things we post on social media are public, whether we've got that account set to private or not. So it's that you provide the username and/or view access to the account. And the phrasing there was because some of our elementary teachers specifically use like Facebook groups that are private to share information about their classroom. And so they could provide view access to that account in lieu of a username, trying to be all-encompassing there.
Okay.
I didn't really realize they did that.
So the one phrase that that I don't like in here that I want to ask you about is the very first paragraph in red, where it says, undermine supervisory authority and/or compromise working relationships with MCPS schools and offices. I don't know, I read that and it just felt really Orwellian to me. And, you know, given what we're going through right now with the ELA issue, you know, or, you know, I could interpret that as, oh, you're undermining my supervisory authority by complaining about StudySync or whatever, right? But this won't be the last thing that, you know, we'll have some dissent on, and I don't know that we need to, you know, have a police state or police, you know, district. I don't know that, I don't like that wording. I think it's a little bit too broad. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so it is in other places in your policy manual. So this isn't the only time that it's mentioned in your policy manual as a whole. It is a restatement of fact here, again, for the purpose of providing clarity. I think that when we talk about the specific legal word of undermining supervisory authority, that is not using the proper channels that are available to you, which includes coming to this meeting and talking in public address. That is absolutely an appropriate public channel. So that gets into some real specific attorney HR language that I am certainly not authorized to speak on, but they are distinct when you talk about that. And I do need to tell you, it is in other places in your policy manual about jeopardizing your workplace relationships, about jeopardizing the integrity of others that you work with. Those are things that we sign off on every year when we sign off on our annual policy notifications as employees.
I will share, I made one, I'm trying to get to the right one, I'm sorry, 5-1.6. I made one, Ms. Drake and I talked about this, you know, before the meeting, and the policy right before at 5-1.5, which is our personnel statement of ethics, which references policy 5-1.6. There's a statement at the end that says, nothing in this policy should be interpreted as infringing upon employees' civil rights and liberties that have been established by the state and federal constitutions, court rulings, and laws. And so we were discussing, we could add that component to this policy as well, you know, to clarify, people still have their, you know, their rights as given to them. But these things are speaking specifically to you as, you know,
I guess
do your employee role.
Some of these things are hard to, like, how do you determine whether somebody has some, so the personal social media use, I get the professional social media use, I mean, but an employee's use of personal social media may not disrupt the work, school environment, okay, I get that. Impair their ability to perform, what would I do that might impair my ability to perform my MCPS duties effectively? I guess, how do I interpret that as, how would I know if somebody did that?
If they were posting all day long when you were paying them to work.
Okay, so this is about actually,
right, those things, right? It would impair their ability to do their job because they were doing something else.
I think that's where the confusion lies, is that it's more their actual use. And I think what some of us are mixing up is the actual information itself. And so, yeah, I get that you shouldn't be doing that during your work time and everything. But that it's not. I don't know if it quite reads that way. And then I have to say, undermine supervisory authority. What would be an example of that? I guess I need to make sure we know. I mean, if we're going to put these in here, we need to know what would be an example of those things. That's all. If somebody did this, how would I know they did it?
Sure. Ms. Drake?
I mean, again, that gets into HR and legal language, and I would hate to stand up here and provide a specific example.
It might be helpful to have just maybe if we could get somebody could provide us with just a little. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who's got the question.
No, I mean,
I do think it's a fair question, and I think it's something that we can look at as well. And I don't mean to say Ms. Drake didn't provide it to me to look at before, because she absolutely did. But I can see your questions, and I think some of the things below under unacceptable conduct cover what would undermine your job, right? So I think we probably could strike that supervisory authority piece, because we have underneath of there what that unacceptable conduct would be detailed. And so it's kind of doing the same thing there in two ways. I think that would be, in a change that we could make that still keeps the policy in the way that it's intended, but makes it not seem quite so.
Yeah, because when it's vague, if you can't really identify exactly what you would be doing to violate the policy, like then it's vague and it leaves it up to interpretation, and that's always when we get ourselves in trouble.
I mean, I was just going to add, I was going to come out even stronger, but since you're willing to be flexible on that one,
I think it's an easy way, an easy one, because it still covers what we need it to by taking that out. And I certainly understand, what you're thinking on that.
And I get it. I mean, I realize that there are people who do, maybe they kind of abuse that. Social media is bad.
So the piece that I also have an issue with is that undermining, because it is so subjective.
Sure.
Very.
So I think what we'll do for the next reading, when we bring it back to you, we'll just strike that line, because again, I do think the things that we need to be, with my HR, having used this policy, the things that we need within it, if we strike that, I do believe we're still just fine.
Okay. Sounds good. Anybody else have any other thoughts, questions? Okey doke. Thank you, Ms. Drake. Next, licensed personnel evaluation revision.
Great. So this policy revision reflects the addition of an 8th evaluation standard, which is required by law. Each standard will now account for 12.5% of the evaluation and performance rating. And Mr. Knott is here to address any questions you may have.
Thought you were going to get away from not seeing us tonight, huh, Mr. Knott?
Got away from the last discussion.
You need to stretch his legs a little. So they added another standard. Oh, goody.
That happened 2 years ago, the cultural responsive standard. It takes the play, it is now standard 6, and then professionalism is standard 7, and then the student growth is standard 8. And the model from the state was to have each standard count for 12.5%. And a couple years ago, when we were reviewing this, thinking it was going to be implemented, this was the percentages that we decided. Then when it really wasn't implemented, we went back. And so this is just a reflection of what the state did with that
I remember talking about this. And I remember, because I was wondering why we couldn't, because I think there was 1 or 2 standards we could go lower on.
It was the performance standard. At that time, it was standard 7. That was the one you were asking about. Now they're all equal. If this policy is approved.
And this is required by the state, right?
Yes, ma'am. The 8 standards are required in the evaluation of both teachers and administrators.
The standard's correct, but the percentages are something we get to determine?
We can determine the percentages. This is the model that the percentages here are the model.
We could do lower on performance, the student performance, then, right?
We could, But this is the model
I know,
that the
it's
state.
the model that
and-
they're suggesting, but we
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
have to do that.
But
if
the
we don't want to.
the group that came together 2 years ago.
Of employees, correct?
Of employees, yes, ma'am. We wanted to go with this to begin with, the 12.5%, equal across the board.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of standard 7 or 8, so, but, I mean, any of the standards, but it is what it is. Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Knott.
Madam Chair, before we go to our next one, I know with the board representatives being their first meeting, I know sometimes around 9, we tend to say, if you guys need to go, we know you've got homework in school.
I am fine with that. If you guys would like to stay, you are welcome to stay.
But
And if
maybe
you
even
feel
need,
like you
before.
need to go, it's
if you need
okay.
to adios, you can do that too.
Because I know you
If there's-
find it fascinating, right?
I'm sure. I applaud you for staying awake for this whole time.
Well, if there's anything that they want to share, we used to do
Any
student
thoughts
board
on anything we've
reports.
talked about so far?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I just had like a thing about like the ELA stuff and all that because like I go to Auburn and we have amazing teachers and like I wouldn't be where I am in like my academic career and like I wouldn't want to be here like going to college to be a teacher if I didn't have like the great people I had to help me find the love of teaching and to see like teachers I personally know have to be like put into a little box when they have so much like creativity for lesson plans because I know when I make lesson plans for my kids in 6th grade because I help like I'm an aide for my teacher I would feel so constricted because all of those kids learn in different ways and like from teachers who have been doing this for decades and I've been doing this for like an hour and a half a day for 2 years. I love all my kids and I would want them to succeed and I think I would know what is best for them even though I am not like a professional teacher because I know them and for like someone who does not know the individual children to put a standard on them that will not help them in the long term because I can walk into my classroom and know each and every kid and what they can and cannot do and what their ability level is. But if a random person walked into that room, they could not judge just based off a minute, like what those kids can and cannot do. So I feel like for like people stepping into teachers' classrooms where they've been doing this for decades and decades, because Mr. Stoddard was my teacher and I know he's been doing this for a lot longer. He taught so many people and just to see him go into this box now is just, it dulls like the connection between students and teachers because they don't have the connection anymore because they just cannot teach them in the way that the students need to be taught.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. That's a very unique insight that you have and good for you for wanting to be a teacher.
Yeah, I'd also like to speak now because I do have homework, and I was going to save it till unfinished business, but I'll talk on the ELA curriculum right now as well. I want to second everything that Emma said. It saddens me to hear my former teachers. Miss Disler was a great teacher, and to have her be teaching from a canned curriculum now, that's just not Miss Disler teaching. That's the computer teaching, and I could go home and learn that on my own. Like I come to school for my teachers. And I'd like to make the comment that a lot of people like to say that, oh, this curriculum is making it so that we don't have parent complaints. That's sort of what this solves, is we don't have parents complaining about books. Alternate books are being offered. And through my time in the MCPS English curriculum, I have never experienced a particularly offensive book. And if I did, I feel confident that I would be offered an alternative route. I'd also just like to second that the 5 paragraphs, excerpts are not how you learn to read. I did not build the endurance to read a whole book by reading 5-paragraph sections every few days. That's silly. You should be able to make a connection to the characters. You should be able to get stories. English is about learning about our culture, not just learning the norms of grammar. And also the example about annotations. We should be doing the things that we're trying to learn. We should not be taking a multiple choice test on what the best annotations are. We should be annotating. These are common sense solutions, and what Courtney Roberts brought up about letting teachers decide when to use this additional tool and when not to use this additional tool is also a common sense solution. We should be implementing that tonight. I'll be home doing physics, but I hope that you guys will be implementing it as I do that. So thank you for my time speaking.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing real quick?
Absolutely.
Going off what Sam said, it's like teachers know what they're doing, and this just feels like a tool to like set them back. And I do agree that we should just implement this tool into what they already have, because this could be great for some students. This could work amazingly for some, but for others, this is like a kick in the teeth. Like advanced students don't have the challenging enough, and students who are below level, it's so hard for them that they feel like unmotivated to learn. And then just for other students, they just want more variety. And the teachers know that based on what kids they're teaching and like what grades they have. Because sitting in front of a computer, like my AP English class, the second we had to do AP work online, it was like all common sense left the window and we weren't doing it. But like we sit there and have discussions, we were all invested. The second we had to do online work, it was like, and these are kids that are in advanced placement, so if they can't even sit still long enough to do that, I can't imagine like a room full of 6th graders who are just like learning how to like annotate and develop like their thoughts into like more rigorous like essays and stuff, how they feel sitting in front of a computer screen and just having these small little excerpts and not even getting to practice on like hands-on. So that's my thoughts on it.
I really hate to pile on. I'll just add, totally when, and I've been lucky not to have too much online experience in my English classes, but throughout my science curriculum, I don't know if you've heard of these, they're called gizmos, and you go online and you do a virtual simulation of an experiment, and the most consistent thing in my science classes is the groan from students when gizmos come out. And that's science. Those are numbers, those are facts, those aren't things that you have to really connect on an emotional level with. This is English. We should not be putting that online.
Well, thank you to both of you. I think it is awesome that we're able to get your viewpoint, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. And good luck with your physics homework. And Emma, with whatever homework you have this evening, good luck.
Let's see, have we gone through all? Yeah.
And we're up to COVID update, which means guess who we get to see?
We do.
Just one thing, if I could, is to go back to the suspensions and, no, that wasn't, anyway, suspensions and expulsions. Under the previous administration, we had a hearing officer, which was one person, the superintendent. And before that, the board heard cases, which could get very time-consuming. So I would like for us at some point, especially with our new superintendent, to talk about how we will handle suspension, expulsion cases. I personally would like to see a committee of administrators and possibly even teachers, I don't know, to be able to hear those cases and not just be left to one person, unless the board wants to start doing them again.
At this time, just as a reminder, we do have a committee, and so that is, it does not include, it is 3 people. It's Dr. Johnson, then the Director of Equity, Ms. Wood-Setzer, and then it is also Mr. Garrettson as well. No, is that right? Correct?
So Right,
I
so-
apologize. Yeah, just so you know who was, working on that at this time.
Which I am fine with, but I think that's something the board is supposed to make a decision on how we're going to do that.
That's something we could talk about at the retreat? Is it?
Sure.
We could probably do it at a board meeting, I don't know.
Okay.
There's a lot getting piled onto that retreat.
Yeah, well, I got to keep busy.
Well, just to give the board an idea right now, we have a disciplinary hearing committee that consists of 4 members.
4.
So myself as the Director of Student Supports and Interventions, Mr. Jason Garrison, who is the Director of Student Service and School Safety, Ms. Colleen Woodsetzer, who is the Director of Equity and Diversity, and Dr. Tony Walker, who is the Director of Special Ed. And so having 4 different team members on this committee, we can hear different perspectives, and we have the opportunity to debrief after we have information about students, and we truly can problem solve around what are the best next steps for that student based on not only that incident that took place, but then also what that student and he or she has been through outside the 4 walls of school. So we truly like this process.
Right, and I agree. I'm just saying, as a process, the board is supposed to decide how that's going to be handled.
Yes, ma'am.
And we just need to make something official.
Did you all decide on whether you want that at the retreat or at an upcoming board meeting?
For me, I would personally like to just have discipline, period, on the retreat, because everything that I'm hearing, from bullying on down to some of the teachers that I talk to that say that's why they get out of teaching, is because of the expression of not being backed on a discipline issue, along with bus drivers, and the same thing, and we wonder why we can't get anybody. The teachers that I've spoke to, it doesn't have to do with a lot of other things. It has to do with they're tired of dealing with situations and they're not getting rendered. So for me, I would like definitely, even if we don't spend a long, long time on it, to discuss discipline and making sure that's another way that we're listening to our staff and we're doing something about it. And for our parents, I mean, we heard tonight. And, I'm a believer, sometimes sad to say, just reading some of my own emails, and we wonder why some of our students are bullies. I mean, and some of the things that we hear, so we definitely need to, put discipline on there. Let's talk about it. How can we help our staff and our teachers to feel like they're being heard?
Yep, support it, yeah. Because there are changes as to how, even from the state level, we do things.
So that was on the retreat, correct? Okay.
Okay. We are packing that agenda.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about start time.
Thank you.
We haven't talked about start time.
So you referenced the COVID update. Mr. Garrettson is here
He is
to provide
waiting
that
in the
for
wings.
us.
He can't wait to get up here and talk to us.
I think he wanted to put the words on there last before this presentation, right?
And there's
How's
a
it
clicker at
going,
the-
Mr. Garrettson?
It's going well. Good evening, board. I would like to thank everyone for that little pause, because I was standing in the back thinking, gosh, I do not want to follow those 2 excellent student speakers with my presentation about COVID. So I was happy to wait a few minutes to...
Yeah, that would have been kind of a letdown.
It's tough. That's what I'm saying, right? Not only do I follow them, but it's about COVID. We do want to take just a couple minutes tonight. We have just a small number of slides, really just from the standpoint of updating the board and making sure that board, administration, schools, and community are kind of all on the same page in regard to where we are right now with COVID. As you know, we started the school year with this chart from the Virginia Department of Health. You can see up in the upper right-hand corner, it was dated July 8th, 2022. That's what we started the school year with, kind of as our guidelines for what we needed to do starting the school year. At that last presentation, we also were very specific. Members of the board were very specific to say, again, these are guidelines. These are guidelines, and that will become important again as we move to the next slide. As you can see, This flow chart has been discontinued. It has been taken down off of the Virginia Department of Health's page. It's been taken down off our webpage as well. The latest guidance was released in August 22nd to be specific. Again, I'll just try to give some highlights. The two biggest highlights are that it recommends the same guidance, whether you are a vaccinated or unvaccinated individual. If you went back to the flow chart, it kind of broke it down right away in the first step based on your vaccination status. That guidance is now gone. The second highlight is that it encourages testing recommended by an individual's healthcare provider. So rather than it just saying should or suggest or encourage testing, which many times school members were in the position of having to say, well, it really says you should go get tested, it takes that away from us and says, you know, you really ought to be talking to your healthcare provider who knows your medical history, who is a doctor, and who is in the best position to really give you this advice. You do have the link down there at the bottom for members of the board or anybody in the community who wants to go to that page. That takes you directly to the guidance from the 22nd, which is all text, no flow charts, okay? Some impacts from Montgomery County Public Schools. We basically returned back to our standard school exclusion guidelines, meaning when we send kids home when they're sick. And that's back to a fever of 100.4 or some of that GI stuff that always, traditionally, even before the pandemic, that would be grounds for us to say, hey, you need to go home and get better. We found with the old flow chart that we took down, that's been discontinued, it still listed all those symptoms that could be attributed to COVID. And we found that we were sending home a lot of students based on things that in the past we would have never sent a kid home for. So we hopefully get to keep more of our students in school. The student can return after symptoms have resolved for 24 hours without the use of medication. That's all of our old guidance. That's all of our old standard, I should say. If parents or employees have questions about isolation, meaning they have tested positive and staying at home because you tested positive is isolation, we're just going to refer them to the VDH guidance, right? It's not us. Our best medical folks are, of course, our school nurses who have been totally overwhelmed for the past 2.5 years. So again, we're going to start to move some of that burden away from the school and back to the families and the medical community and say, hey, here's a great chart, or, well, there is no chart, forgive me. Here's the guidance from VDH. Although the VDH themselves will emphasize this is only guidance. Even your representatives from the health department will say, this is guidance, take it or leave it. We cannot require a student to wear a mask. That is still Governor's Executive Order 2, I believe, where under no circumstances can we require it. But they are still an available option, and of course you continue to see them out in the community. I think we've seen some of them here tonight. So certainly if an individual feels like that's the best decision for them, they're not going to hear a complaint or a grumble from us. That's their choice. The R code for attendance, which was put in place during the height of the pandemic across the state, is still authorized for students who test positive for COVID. So if you're going to reach out to your school and say, hey, I need to keep my kiddo home, we're following the VDH isolation guidelines, so we're going to do 5 days at home before he can come back. We'd like to go ahead and get him marked R. He's actually marked present. That's not an excused absence, that's present, and he's able to work from home. But because there are no more quarantines, we cannot extend that R code to, say, family members or an individual who says, hey, I spent the weekend with somebody who just tested positive. Just to be safe, I'm going to stay home from school. We're really not in a position to extend the R code for that because there is no more standard or guideline for quarantine. We, of course, continue to coordinate with our local health department regarding anything unusual, and I know that's very generic in general, but basically what it boils down to is if we have a question that we're not comfortable answering, or if we see something maybe we haven't seen before, or maybe we're hearing about some situations that are concerning based upon our experience over the last 2.5 years, we still can reach out to the department. They're still very, very good to respond to us in a timely fashion and have in fact reviewed this information prior to us kind of putting it in motion and sharing it with the board tonight. So again, I think that was my last slide. I am, of course, open for any questions you may have.
guess I was going to throw one out. Probably the most common concern that I've seen from some parents is just when it comes to lunch, right? It's the one time when, everybody's kind of unmasked and there's a lot of kids in the cafeteria and stuff. Obviously, we're not doing the outdoor tents and a lot of that stuff, but is it a true statement that if parents do have concerns that the right answer there is to reach out to the principal and they can try to work out some kind of accommodation?
Yes, sir, always. We do still say to our principals, we understand that there are still people getting sick. We understand people have various specific situations where this is maybe more concerning for them and their family than in other situations in other families. So we still want to meet people where we're at. We still want to try to provide things to help people feel comfortable and safe sending their children to school. So if a person were to say, hey, principal, I'd like you to try to make some arrangements for my student to either eat with some distance or maybe eat outside, if there's any possibility for that, we're going to do our best to try to make that happen. Yes, sir.
Just to recap, and this is all fine, and I'm glad we seem to be coming out of the woods on all of this. If somebody does test positive and then they stay home, we point them to the VDH guidance, which then says what? That is it 5 days, or is it until they test negative? What is the current guidance?
Right, the VDH guidance does speak about, and again, that's the link on the third slide. It does talk about on day 6, provided you are no longer carrying a fever and your symptoms are resolving, you can return, and they recommend with a mask. There's also another option in the newest guidance that talks about 2 negative tests, right? And we've got a little less experience with that. But again, they are very quick to say that's guidance, that's recommendations. But yes, sir, we do have an ability to get, under the latest guidance, ability to get students back pretty quickly. And again, the R code is meant to keep them afloat academically as long as they're well enough to work from home.
Thank you, Mr. Garrettson. Always lovely to see you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Whitaker, Superintendent report.
Let's see. Okay. I had 2 main things to share today. The first is making sure the board is aware, while our Human Resources Department has been working very, very hard on staffing, we are having critical issues with staffing our bus drivers. In addition, we're having a really hard time with our cafeteria employees. Although they are through, the company that we work with, they certainly still support our schools, and it's an impact when we can't find staff in those areas. Mr. Knott and Ms. Widener are working very, very hard and have come up with some really innovative ways, but I do think it's important that the board and our community knows, particularly with our bus drivers, that we are very low, and it is going to, well, I'm not going to say it is going to. My hope is that it doesn't, but we are having to plan for what happens when we don't have folks to drive some of our after-school activities. And so Mr. Husbands met with our ADs to talk about what that looks like, but we can't staff trips that we don't have people for. And so I just want to make the community and the board aware we are having significant problems hiring the bus drivers we need. What that does is that pulls away from those who are working on our buses. And so there's, some buses that we need to be fixing. They're not on the road, so everything's fine, but our staff should be, working on those. And they've been working 11-hour days for a very long time, and it's just not sustainable. And so there could be a point where we're not able to take our athletes to some of their games or our students to some of their events, but we simply can't just put someone on a bus to drive it. So I would implore the public, if you know anybody who is looking for a position, we really need help with bus drivers.
$20 an hour?
It's $20 an hour.
A $2,000 sign-on bonus.
$2,000 signing bonus. We provide all the training. It's paid
5,000?
training.
No.
25, is that what you're saying? by October 1st, add another 500 to that signing bonus. But we've worked very, very hard. It does require training. If you know somebody with a CDL that might be looking, that would be amazing, because they could come right in and train on buses, and then get in, and the training isn't quite as long as having to get the entire CDL. We have worked to exhaust, try to get coaches to drive, try to get, all types of employees, but it is a concern, and I want to make sure the board's aware, because I would not want us to have to say we can't go somewhere and it be a surprise. But we are at the point of having to determine which things will get priority in terms of getting drivers. The first will be the instructional day, making sure that we can get to and from school. But anything people in the community can do to help us find, I know everybody is short-staffed, but it is a concern. So I just wanted to share that first. And also our cafeteria workers, we are down 15 cafeteria workers. And so, again, we have a third party that we contract through, but they're still serving our schools, and our cafeteria staff works so hard every day. But we do need people in those positions as well. And then the second was just to update you all. I know we brought the budget calendar for you all, but want to let you know I'm meeting with the employees from or the representatives from those employee groups next week to help prepare them for their employee group presentations on October 18th. And so really what I'm going to do at that time is just provide them opportunity to ask questions. Sometimes folks are uncomfortable coming up and speaking in public. So give those employee groups an opportunity to ask questions and, help if they want with a template of kind of, hey, you can ask the board for whatever you want to ask them for, that type of thing, but just to help support them in that speaking event.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. So now we are, let's see. I'm going to keep going unless you guys feel like you need a break, because we're almost to the end here, but.
Let's go.
Keep going? Okay. Because then we'll go to closed session. We can take a break there. Unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? Mr. Chewbacca.
So, yeah, I think that we started talking about this the last meeting, and obviously it's still a huge concern among our teachers, our ELA teachers, among our students, parents. To tack on to what I was saying earlier, we are the ones in charge here. And at this point, we've got teachers coming to us saying one thing, and we have administrators coming to us and saying a different thing. And I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody or any one person or anything like that, but I think we have a problem here. And I think the rollout of this new curriculum, I'm not judging anybody's intentions or anything like that, but I think that it's evident that it has not been successful. And
yeah, I have to agree with you, Mr. Chewbacca. I've already said quite a bit about it in the past, but I think that we're hearing from teachers from more than just one school. We're hearing from Blacksburg schools, Christiansburg schools, Auburn schools. We just heard from very eloquent students, one from Blacksburg, one from Auburn, who are saying kind of the same thing. And I understand that there's state policy that we have to follow, but there has got to be a solution that is not just saying, I'm sorry, but you have to. So what you got to do, period.
So some of the speakers tonight and some of our student representatives said this, but I heard from a student very close to me this week that
in your house,
possibly, that all of a sudden she doesn't like English, and she said it's like taking a class online. It's like doing Khan Academy or something. And we've heard that repeatedly. And I think, we not only are we hearing from every strand, every level, we're hearing from our teachers. They're begging for professional respect. They're asking if we've lost faith in them. And I personally want to take this opportunity to at least say, as a board member, speaking for myself, no, I have not lost faith in you. I believe the things that you're saying. I believe that there's a problem. And I hate to say this, but, we had a discussion about it last week with staff, and I don't think things got better. I think in some ways they even got worse. So I don't know which way the board would like to go on this, but I think that we need to take some kind of action, and we don't have to do it tonight, but I think that that's what I see coming. And, I think the first thing we could do is we could take on a board investigation, which sounds scary and big, but doesn't have to be. It could be one person from the board talking to a few different people to try to figure out, what's that solution going to be. I suppose we can come up with our own temporary solution, but I know that there are things that we don't always think about, with the law and things like that. That doesn't make me comfortable. And I think the third option is to just direct staff at this point to work with teachers to fix this by giving some flexibility immediately, and then we can try to, I don't want to say unravel, but try to do something. I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to have other problems on our hands if we're not going to do something about this. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that Mr. Chewbacca said there. I feel like the last meeting was very instructive, at least for me. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before, but we didn't really do anything, right? We all shook our heads and walked away, and the teachers are still teaching, and the students are still stuck in the same thing, right? So unlike some of our policies and stuff where maybe there's like tangential impacts, like this is impacting these students every day. Every day we don't do something, they're being impacted. So again, I don't know what's appropriate, like what we can do right now as a board, but I feel like we got to do something quick. It's not working.
So for me, what I've heard is that this program was rolled out 2 years later than what it really should have been rolled out. And then it sounded like we need to get something done, so we're gonna do this. I am not saying that the information that was given was this way or that way. What I will say is that we as a board need to start listening and getting presentations the way they should be done and not hyphenated, so that we have a better idea of exactly what's going on. The suggestion of allowing teachers to be able to see what's needed and then plug something in. If I'm hearing what Dr. Whitaker said, is that any book that is used has to go through the approval process per the state. Is that correct?
Both state law, the Constitution of Virginia, and school board policy state that the materials must be reviewed and approved. There's a difference.
By who though?
By who? So the state adopts the textbooks. And so what happens is the state provides both a process that they do, because it's a very thorough process. You can either choose books from their list, which Montgomery County, has done, I think, every book ever in history. So remember, every content area gets textbooks approved. I've never seen a school division do a local adoption process, but you can do one. It's for each of those materials, and it has to be to the same level of rigor and criteria that the state does, and that's Code of Virginia.
Okay, so here's where I see there may be one of the big problems is because just because the state says this is a good book doesn't necessarily mean that it's the book that's going to work for students.
Oh, they give us, they give us a bunch of different ones, and then we pick from, they approve a list. We get that list. Then we look at that list, and that's what our teachers did. They went through a variety of options. They went through.
You mean you're talking about the textbooks, not novels?
Yes, the textbooks.
Okay.
Yeah. for, he had asked, how do you get them approved? So we get that big list, and we can either say, we want something off this list, and there's more than one choice. Or we can say, we don't want to do that, but then you have to go through, align every SOL, you have to prove it's in the book, you have to make sure that it's got the tools that you need for lesson planning, and so it can't just be, like, it's got to be resources for teachers as well. And then you have to get some certifications from those publishers, and you have to make sure that the procurement is in line. So those are the legal requirements. I think that's why most school boards pick books off of the lists, because they start about 3 years ahead on their process of reviewing. So right now, they're updating the social studies standards, and then what they'll do is they'll put out, they have an ongoing 7-year cycle that they do. So this happens every 7 years with all content areas. They start a couple years in advance their review of the books, because it is a very comprehensive process.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that we pick a new textbook right now.
No, I think we're talking about the novels that teachers use in the classroom. How do we get those approved?
So that is the same. It says that those books are considered as primary instructional materials. They have to go through the same type of process. Our policy states that as well, in several different places.
How do they get identified as primary? If we were using the study sync, so then they would be supplemental. So does that, they're not primary?
Would be those things that, if you're teaching a novel, that is a primary instructional resource. That takes 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It is the primary tool you're using for instruction. Our policy actually defines what supplementary materials are. If you give me 1 second, I can pull that up for you. Let me get it. Give me 1 second.
So I think I remember that coming up 2 weeks ago, but it's still, is there a list of novels that have been approved by the state?
So when they come with the approved textbook sets, yes, those lists come with that book. So some of the sets that we looked at had, I went and looked at the reviews when we had them out, and so some of them had actual novels with them. And those would have been approved with the textbook set that they came through. I called the state and confirmed that. Otherwise, no, they do not provide a list of novels for use across school divisions. The majority of what students are expected to know, over 50% of that, is nonfiction texts. And then the rest, they align with this, right? They look at the standards. What is it we are teaching? There is no standard that says, that I'm aware of unless it's changed, here's a standard on a novel, right? Doesn't mean you can't teach things within a novel, but what you'd have to do is go into that novel and say, here's what I'm teaching, here's how the standards correlate, and then that other piece too is what are the instructional resources? So some novel sets come with teacher guides that help them prepare and plan and things like that. And so you would look at that as a set and review it and make sure it's providing the resources that they would need. I can provide you guys, again, a list of, all of these things and all of the links, to the Code of Virginia that states what those processes look like.
I find it interesting to note that that we have so many, we have dozens of teachers that have come and still come and are asking for this and don't understand that, our hands are tied and there's nothing we can do. I mean, I guess that this is a message to my fellow board members. I think this is why I think the board needs to look into this.
Well, I think a lot of it's about how things are rolled out too, and I think this is a really good example of how not to bring about a new change. I think that it should have been very clearly communicated to all the teachers very early on in the process and made it very clear. I don't care what Mr. Polly and Ms. Myers, Dr. Myers said last meeting. There's too many teachers are saying they weren't told that this was going to be required and that this was the only thing they could teach from. Either that or all those teachers are lying to us, and I don't believe that. So I think that it was not well communicated, and we did not involve our teachers. This is a perfect example of what we've continued to do is just top down, push things down. Central office makes a decision, we push it down to our teachers, and our teachers have to do what central office says. And then they're the ones who have to pick up all the pieces and make it all happen. And it's very frustrating to be a teacher, and that's just one more thing we're adding to the list of reasons why people don't want to be teachers anymore. And we maybe keep saying, pretty soon we're gonna have a teacher shortage, and we may be naive and think, oh, it's not gonna happen to us, but it's already happening. It's already happening, and there's less and less people available to teach. And then you look at our young lady here today, boy, talk about getting frustrated early on. She hasn't even gotten college yet, and she's already learning that you get things pushed down on you. So I think this is all just, it was terribly organized and run and rolled out, and people were misled. This is where we need to be honest and transparent and get teachers involved and say, listen, here's the problem. We've got this state policy, we have to follow it. And what that means is we've got to do we've got to accept this textbook, and we've got to figure out how to make it work in our classroom. If we started doing that in March, we would be in a much better place right now. But we didn't. And so now we've got very upset teachers who've had to recreate all of their lesson plans, and maybe we would have found out early on that, wow, this was not a great choice, but.
So we did bring the process to the board for approval in March.
Okay, please.
Could I finish speaking, please? We tried very hard. This is the most information I've ever seen us provide in advance of an adoption.
But you left out the most critical part. The most critical, important part was left out. This is mandatory. This is required. This is what you have to teach with this year. This is your primary source. You can't use any of your supplemental materials in your classroom. This is what you have to work with. That was not told to us. There is no way I would have sat through a meeting and heard that be said and not have opened my mouth.
Ms. Cass, if you would remember, I'm sorry, Ms. Graham, were you speaking?
I don't think it's appropriate or role model for us to be yelling at our employees.
I'm not yelling at our employees.
That was yelling.
You know, Marty,
I'm sorry, that was yelling. So,
Marty, first of all, thank you for your input. And as the chair, I'll continue. I am not yelling at my employees. I am saying that this was done in a way that is hurting many of our employees.
And students.
And students. And so we just sitting here just saying, that's just the way it is.
And I have a hard time, but this is what I'm having a hard time believing. I'm having a hard time believing that our hands are so tied that there is zero room for any kind of relief, any kind of anything. I have a hard time thinking that every single district in the state of Virginia is going through this right now. It's hard to believe. And again, I would love to see some of that, but I haven't seen some of that yet. And so again, I say to my board members that I think the only recourse that we would have in that case would be to look into it ourselves. I mean, that's where I see we are.
Okay, so I don't necessarily understand what you mean by we look into it ourselves. I do think it is not fair to say to our administrators that everything is pushed down, because things are pushed down to them before they get implemented in the district. And this conversation has been going on for years about the mandates that come from Richmond and from DC, from folks who are not even in education, but because somebody is in their ears saying, this is what you need to do. And in many cases, that is to sell what they are selling. So how we figure out how we move forward from here, because it does sound like whatever is happening is not working well for our teachers and for our students. And we need to fix it somehow, some way. And quite frankly, at this point, I don't care if we're breaking whatever the state says, because we have been doing it for a while, and we need to figure out if there's some kind of fix for a period of time until we can get something in place permanent. But right now, we've got to do something.
What happens if we don't follow the state policy? What's going to happen?
So what our attorney has said is that we would first, if, say, we just refused, he said they would take back money from us, that it is in the Constitution of Virginia, there is no question that the Board of Education approves the curriculum materials. I would say too, you know, again, we can go back and forth on the information that was sent, and I can provide you more information, but this is in the email that was sent March 7th to staff, directly from it. This selection is to become the primary instructional resource for grades 6 through 12, and we expect teachers to participate in it.
Right.
We are
we had this conversation, we're only going around in a circle. We had this conversation last week because I asked Carl what primary means.
It's the difference between primary and only. And I think this is the thing that I'm having a hard time, and it sounds like every single one of our teachers is also having a hard time understanding that.
Well, there are a lot more English teachers than we've had here. There are.
But can I finish my
We need
sentence,
to let
please?
Dr. Whitaker finish. She was speaking to begin with. This is the second time she's been interrupted. And, you know, I'm
trying to
sorry, I'm a
clarify.
big respect person. And we need to give our people respect and let people finish. And she was speaking twice, and she's been interrupted twice. Whether you like what she's saying or not, we need to let her continue what she's trying
Jamie,
to
we
say.
all interrupt each other.
And we need
I
to
was trying
stop
to
that.
go ahead.
Okay.
Exactly. We need to stop that.
Yes. So it was made in writing explicitly clear. It was stated and over. Now, I cannot, nor can anybody ever control how somebody receives information. We can always work to do a better job. Absolutely, anybody can. But what I would say is we worked very hard to put a calendar in front of you, to provide you information so you would know in March what was happening. We have never given you an adoption timeline like we did. It was a new process I put into place. It was very detailed and clear. I went step by step through. We invited each of you to attend the curriculum review nights. We sent an email to the group. We have worked very diligently that teachers did select this book. They voted on it. They are implementing it. Again, as a teacher of English, I've been through adoption processes, and just like all of our teachers in all of our content areas, you adopt a book one year and you implement it the next year. As I said, the state sets that calendar for us, and that's how they do it. You adopt in one year and you implement in the next year. And that's what all of our teachers in our curriculum areas, when they adopt a textbook, we just did science. They implemented it the next year. They didn't keep their old science books. They collected, they got the new book, and that's the book that they use moving forward because that's the intention of the code and the law. You know, I can't continue to explain it any better than that. You know, I have all the legal references for you. I have our policies, which clearly define what supplemental materials are. Doesn't mean we can't create a process. Teachers will need to work together to look at what novels do we want to get approved, and then we can work on getting those approved. But when we brought forward the timeline for local adoption, we moved forward with the books that we had. We were not asked to do a local adoption. That's one of the reasons I put standards of quality on the list of things that should be discussed, because these are all things that we do need to know. I can't expect you to know all of those pieces, but these are things that are clearly defined in the Code of Virginia. They're certified every year by our school board chair that we will uphold them, and they are the expectation of the state in educating the children in Virginia.
Well, you just came, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. You just created somewhat of a possible way to start addressing this, and I think that's what we need to communicate to teachers, that yeah, let's start looking at your materials then. Let's start doing something. We're sitting here talking about it, so that sounds like at least a possible way to go after this. So can we say that we're going to do that?
Michaeline said that at the last meeting.
Well, she didn't say that specifically. She said
Yes,
She did say that.
Almost those exact words.
She said, we can look at that.
We plan to start looking at
Right.
that.
Well, there's a difference between we plan to start looking at it and we are looking at it. There's a difference.
But you've got to plan it before you do it.
Well, I would like to see a timeline of what that's going to look like. I think that's the least we could do is find out what's this plan then? Please don't just tell me there's a plan. A plan could be next year. I would like to know that there should be, a real immediate plan. There's obviously an immediate problem.
So I guess, the thing that I wanted to interject earlier is that what we're talking about is, I'm not trying to argue the timeline of the new curriculum. I've been on the board for almost 7 years. I've seen lots of textbook, other curriculums approved. I don't go to those meetings because I'm not a value add to those meetings, right? I trust that the department heads and teachers who are experts in this field are going to the meetings, and if there's a problem, they will let me know. And obviously something failed in that process right now. So what I'm asking is, on this issue of only versus, this is the curriculum, and you can only use things out of this curriculum. What about supplemental? Surely not every single supplemental thing has to be vetted by the state, right? So even if we just allow our teachers, you still have to use this as the primary, but you are allowed to use supplemental resources that help this lesson plan or whatever, this section that you're in. Is that something that we can do? Is it even, there might be some things that are more gray area interpretation type things. I mean, I wouldn't want to do something that is illegal, but certainly doing something that gives them a little bit of breathing room while we, tackle this other list and then the work that Michaeline was talking about last week, I think could be beneficial. I think it's worth looking into.
Sorry, go ahead. So here's where I have a problem with this illegal piece, is whatever we can do to make sure that we're educating our children the best that we can do, it shouldn't be illegal. So I see this is a conversation we need to be having at a higher level to help folks understand your process doesn't work.
I'd also like to bring this up with our attorney, since I know, Annie, you said that you spoke to him, but I think we need to have a conversation about it also.
Idea. I mean, I guess I would ask the question is, I think we asked this last week, but I forget what the answer was, is what we were doing last year illegal? And can we not just go back to that temporarily while we figure this thing out? Or is that not compliant with state law?
It's not compliant. In terms of our policy, to answer the question earlier, what are supplementals? Our policy, this is how our policy describes them. So I would start there with the supplementals if you want to review, because the state describes primary instructional resources. Our policy also defines those. So supplemental resources by policy are magazines, newspapers, charts, pictures, workbooks, kits, videos, software, things like that, that are in addition to supplement the text, the main text or resource. So the example that I believe was given earlier, of, something happened in the news and you have a brief thing that you want to look at, say you're comparing and contrasting. Let's look at these two different articles on Queen Elizabeth, and we're going to use these two short articles to compare and contrast because we've learned about comparing and contrasting, and we're going to do this activity. That would be a supplemental because it's a brief excerpt. A novel is not a supplemental. It is a primary instructional resource. A clip from a magazine, a chart, a picture, those are supplemental resources. But the main resource used to instruct with is the primary. That's how that would be looked at. But if you wanted to revise your policy on supplemental materials, that could be a place. I was trying to, this was not on the agenda, so I didn't have a whole legal thing ready. But in terms of the textbooks, what I was trying to do quickly over here, our policy describes supplemental in detail. The state says to use processes for supplementary, but they don't go into the detail, I don't believe, that we do in supplementary. So the board could certainly look at that as well. In terms of, speaking with Mr. King, I don't think that hurts at all. I think that might provide some clarity for the board.
So are you saying we need to look at our policy that is more stringent than the state policy?
So I'm saying in terms of supplementary, I think you could look at that. I don't know that it changes novel study because that is a primary resource. You know, it takes a long time to teach a novel. You cannot teach that in a day. You cannot teach that in a half hour. It takes weeks, a long time. That is definitely a primary resource. You know, but you could certainly look at this. We could speak with Brad and say, what are the things that you're able to, you know, waiver on in that way. But, you know, I called him, I did, and said, well, what do we do if they don't want to keep this? And he said, number one, they'd have to adopt something else that's approved through these processes. And if they did not, then they would likely lose funding.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask this question again that has been asked. So what have we been doing and not been losing funding?
I would say the people before me were certifying that they were adopting the textbooks on the list. It is certified in our annual compliance report that the superintendent and the school board chair signs.
And who comes and audits these things?
We turn in our compliance to the state.
So
Who made the decision to address it this time?
To address the textbook adoptions?
You know, like to address it to such a severe interpretation.
So it's not a severe interpretation. It is the law. It is what it happens in every school division.
Who was the person who made that decision?
To follow the law, you're saying? So,
No.
I mean, two different things.
No, I don't think that's what I was saying.
Well, one would be I worked with Dr. Meyer when he was here because there was, I think I shared this last time, there was continuing questions about why we didn't have funds available when we were doing adoptions to purchase the things that we needed. So we began to look through, why do we not have the funds? Because I knew clearly how much money we get. This year is a little bit over $1 million for textbook materials. Previous year, you know, it could be behind 900, 700,000, a million, whatever it is, saying, why don't we have the money available? So we went through and began doing an analysis of how these had been being purchased. We knew that the English 6 through 12 had not been adopted, and when I asked why it hadn't, it was because we did not have the funds available to do so, was the answer that I was given. I said, we will fix that because the funds are given to us. There is a state and a local match for textbook funds. It's on one of the few numbers we get on our calc tool list. It's very clearly defined in a way that other funds are not. And so we said, how are we going to make sure to get these funds that are given for this purpose to make sure that we have them? We cleaned that component up, and then we worked through the textbook adoption process. This is something that I continue to update the superintendent on. I have also talked with the board about correcting the adoption, the textbook concerns so that we would have the funds available for them. Our teachers did not have books from the approved list, so we wanted to make sure to get them to them. When our next textbook adoption comes up,
Did we
will do
audit
that
all the teachers'
process.
books? How did we know the teachers didn't have, I guess I'm.
Because I had a list of what was the last approved book, and it wasn't on the list.
Oh, you mean the textbooks? See, I'm getting confused between books as in novels and
Yes.
books as in textbooks.
We did not have a list of what books were being used because they were purchased in a variety, you know, the ones you're speaking of, like, you know, I think you had shared, somebody might go buy this set, or you might have money and get this set. So we didn't even necessarily know from the division level what books were being taught.
I don't think, for me, I'm not so caught, I know that a lot of people talk about novels. I'm not so caught up on just the novels, right? I'm caught up on this idea that the teachers are boxed into only using this online curriculum, and therefore that makes the students boxed into only sitting on the screen, feeling like they're taking an online class when they're in person. I mean, our teachers are creative. I mean, they're whatever we can do. I mean, I don't know what the board action needs to be here. Maybe under new business, we need to put it on the agenda for a future meeting, or maybe this is something that, you know, that you can bring back some ideas that we can take action on, like revising the policy on supplemental materials or something. But I do think to just throw our hands up at this point is not, it's just not an option, I don't think.
Okay, so the statements have been made. we're gonna work on how we can work through this, get together with folks and do that. So just give us a timeline of when that will happen, who will be involved, and go from there.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the plan is going forward. We have a lot of, there's clearly a problem, I think. And I'd like to know how we're gonna,
Yeah, I mean,
what the
that's
plan
I
is.
was- That was what I was suggesting, the same comments that were made last week or 2 weeks ago. Let's figure out how we do it, when. And it may still not be the answers that we want to hear, but at least there's something taking place where conversations are happening.
And I guess it would also be an interesting data point. I don't know if we could get this, if there are any other districts in the state who are using this program and maybe have a head start on us, if they adopted it sooner.
Sure.
And like, how's it going for them? How have they navigated this issue? How are their students doing? Is it just, anytime you have change, you're gonna have some resistance to it, right? And maybe it gets better, maybe it doesn't. But if we're the only ones using this, I'd like to know that too, right?
Yeah, I could certainly, we could reach out to the state and see, and try to get some access to other divisions, sure.
So when do we want to follow up on this? So we can move on?
As soon as possible.
Yeah, I can bring you something at the next board meeting.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. Okay, any other unfinished business? Any, oh, did you have something? Oh, I thought you were. Any items of new business? Are there any announcements? Okay, upcoming school board meetings. Next meeting is October 4th, here. And Brenda, you're going to work on, we have to find somebody to be the, what is it, pro something?
We don't find someone. When the meeting is called to order,
Oh, it
we'll
happens when
walk
the meeting is-
the
okay.
people who are physically present through electing a chair pro tem.
Okay, pro tem. Okay. So I guess at this point, we need to go to closed session. Do I have a motion to enter into closed session as authorized by Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia to discuss 2 personnel matters and 1 student matter?
So moved.
Ms. Woods, roll please.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Trubaka?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Cass? 7 in favor.